És un plaer per mi donar la benvinguda al Rain Film Festival, que és un festival que jo coordino amb la companya i amiga Teresa Roig. És més que un festival dirigit pel Frederic Herrero Soler, el Jordi Balló, la Coloma Ballester i l'Anna Giral Gris. És un moment emocionant i de començ de pluja. A banda de... Vaig agafar les notes. És important per mi dir que el Rain neix de la universitat pública i aquest fet marca un caràcter i també un posicionament davant de diversos reptes socials. El Rain és un vector de recerca, el Rain és un vector de cultura i també és un vector d'innovació i transferència i per tant això per nosaltres és indissoluble. Creiem que reptes sociotecnològics de tan calat com és la irrupció de la intel·ligència artificial generativa en l'àmbit de la creació i de la comunicació social, per tant, només es poden abordar si els sabers hiperespecialitzats, si els sabers situats es posen al servei de programes transdisciplinars, com ara és el Rain. Vol ploure, auguraven abans de la primera edició i posàvem imatge a un conjunt a una bandada d'ocells que recorrien el cel en maig de 2023 en un moment d'irrupció de la intel·ligència artificial generativa, particularment en l'àmbit de l'audiovisual. I creiem que sí és veritat que el Festival Rain va néixer en l'any 2023, en un moment clau. En aquest 2024 es consolida i no només això, sinó que continua assumint molt de riscos i amb un posicionament molt crític davant d'aquesta implementació tecnològica en l'àmbit de la creació. Després d'una primera edició, la UPF coordina aquest festival amb Sonar i aquesta aliança és programàtica i és imparable. Compta amb el suport de la Generalitat de Catalunya, en particular del Departament de Cultura, Innovació i Cultura Digital i també de l'Ajuntament de Barcelona. Compta amb la col·laboració del Centre de Cultura Contemporània de Barcelona i també del Consell Social d'aquesta universitat. És una activitat en el marc del programa Primavera Cultura UPF. Faré una dissecció anatòmica del mes. Molta gent ens pregunta. El Rain és un festival de cinema fet amb intel·ligència artificial, però també una sessió d'experiències de live cinema i més que això, una jornada internacional de recerca teòrica, de recerca aplicada, d'obertura de processos creatius i també de showcase de tecnologies en aquest sector i més una sessió d'arts en vius i de presentació de projectes d'artistes, tecnòlogues que treballen des de fa molt de temps amb aquestes tecnologies i també una selecció d'instal·lacions. El mes fa referència també a un espai de treball per persones del sector de les tecnologies i també de les indústries culturals i creatives que es posen en contacte amb artistes, amb tecnòlogues, amb juristes per debatre sobre els principals reptes de la intel·ligència artificial generativa en aquest sector i més una sessió, un summit per inspirar, per donar a conèixer el talent acadèmic, el talent que fa recerca, el talent que fa transferència, que emprèn i que crea dintre d'aquesta intersecció entre tecnologies emergents i tecnologies no tan noves potser i la creativitat. El mes Rain estarà filmint i això per nosaltres és molt important per donar a conèixer el festival més enllà del que passi aquí i ara i del que passi en Sonar. I un dels eixos temàtics és el pensar sobre la figura de l'artista tecnòloga, l'artista que no és només una operària d'aquestes tecnologies i que és no només una funcionària de determinats programes, sinó l'artista que té agència sobre aquestes tecnologies i es posa al centre, com pensem, del debat social sobre la irrupció de la generativa en la creativitat. I la imatge feta per l'estudi Coure mostra, si em permetiu, aquesta tensió entre la capacitat d'agència davant d'aquestes tecnologies per part de les creadores i certes forces gravitatòries obscures que no ens poden ser alienes. ens posicionem al costat i volem donar veu a les veus més crítiques sobre aquesta implementació, sobre qüestions de calat ambiental, sobre qüestions de certes opacitats i mancança de transparències a l'hora de generar els models i sobre el futur dels creadors i creadores i particularment els estudiants i les estudiants que estan en les aules d'aquesta universitat i d'altres i que tenen molt de por sobre el futur i com l'automatització, quins són els reptes que l'automatització i la intel·ligència artificial generativa portarà cap al seu futur. Crec que no és casualitat que comencem pel research i en aquest sentit el research mira al present i mira al futur, però també mira a un temps profund de la intersecció entre creació i tecnologies emergents. No és casual que el grup d'Orígens del Cinema de Girona esté dintre del Rein. Aquesta perspectiva media arqueològica ens donarà moltes claus per enfrontar diversos dilemes estètics, ètics i polítics d'aquí a futur. I finalitzaré la meva intervenció mirant cap a dintre i reclamant el Rein no només és un esdeveniment anual, sinó que és una pluja fina que esperem que cali en tota la comunitat acadèmica i que contribuï a demandar més capacitat de computació per a l'alumnat local i distribuït, espais de coaprenentatge i de creació interdisciplinar amb aquestes tecnologies i la connexió amb les principals agents del sector. A continuació, i des d'aquí, vull donar la paraula a la vicerectora de Transferència del Coneixement d'aquesta universitat, Vanessa Daza. A continuació, a Mercè Oliva, que és la recent inaugurada directora del Departament de Comunicació, crec que en el seu primer acte públic com a tal. A continuació parlarà Vladimir Estrivill, el director del Departament de Tecnologies d'Informació i les Comunicacions, i inaugurarà el Research Frederic Guerrero Soler, codirector del Rain Film Festival. Endavant, Vanessa.
No és allà, home. Com vulguis. Si ho deixo i no... Està encès? Sí, em sentiu, no? Doncs, amics, amigues, col·legues, tots, benvinguts en nom meu i en nom de tot l'equip de govern de la Universitat Pompeu Fabra. Com bé explicava l'Andrea, ens havien demanat que fossin curts i ella ho ha fet també i ens ha explicat tantes coses que realment seré molt breu. Estem a la segona edició. Jo crec que a la primera tots som conscients que va ser un èxit rotund, el Rein, i per tant crec que la segona representa un repte, no? Un repte quan les coses van també a l'inici. La segona doncs està clar que s'ha de mantenir el nivell i com no, superar-ho. He fet una ullada al programa, he mirat els números, som conscient de tot el que ha estat passant i crec que quasi em puc aventurar a dir que efectivament serà un èxit. Per tant, gràcies a tots els que heu fet possible, als 4 directors, a les coordinadores, per tota aquesta feina i per fer que aquest festival estigui aquí a la universitat. Sé que el compartim, sé que hi ha que aquesta tarda estarem a la inauguració, sé moltes coses, però jo crec que l'esperit de la Pompeu està al Rein, l'esperit de com es fan les coses a la Pompeu, i crec que això és important. I per tant, enhorabona i gràcies a tots els que ho heu fet possible. Estava parlant del Rein, però en realitat ja sé que estem aquí al Rain Research, com ja comentava l'Andrea. Aquesta jornada on s'intentarà discutir quin és l'ús de la intel·ligència artificial per crear continguts. Però a més el que m'agrada, jo el mes, que tampoc no sabia ben bé com anava, jo me'l prenia perquè el mes és més que això. És una part de discutir sobre l'impacte polític que tu comentaves, la creativitat, temes de fairness, temes de justícia, temes molt més enllà del que seria pròpiament la part d'intel·ligència artificial i la narrativa. Per tant, això és una cosa que realment voldria remarcar. Com deia, es consolida i a més s'expandeix. L'any passat, ara ja creixen 2, ara ja tenim el Research Rainsight i Rainova. O sigui que realment ens anarem fent grans i, a més, a un creixement quasi que exponencial, o sigui que realment la més sincera enhorabona. I realment només voldria acabar amb una llei de Sir Arthur C. Clarke, jo crec que no necessita presentacions. El que jo no sabia és que no només era un meravellós escriptor, guionista d'algunes d'aquestes pel·lícules que han marcat història, sinó que també era físic i matemàtic i de fet, si m'ho permeteu, a més, jo crec que un gran visionari pel seu temps, i això és una cosa que realment m'agrada, un punt del Rain. I ell, aquesta tercera llei, deia que qualsevol tecnologia que estigui suficientment desenvolupada és indistingible de la màgia. Jo crec que el que anem a fer aquests dies és justament això, és explorar aquesta màgia de la mà, aquesta màgia representada d'alguna manera per la intel·ligència artificial, i veure quin és l'impacte que té a la nostra manera de crear i contar històries. Per tant, confio en que aquestes discussions ens proporcionin un coneixement que ens faci inspirar, utilitzar aquesta intel·ligència artificial de manera responsable i innovadora. I agafo aquestes paraules de l'Andrea, que parla que el Rain no és pluja, sinó que és aquest fi plogim que tant necessitem i que tant gaudim. Per tant, espero que gaudim tots aquests dies d'aquesta fina pluja que tant necessitem en tots els aspectes. Gràcies.
Hola a totes i a tots. Com deia l'Andrea, jo em dic Marcelo Bertalmío, soc la directora del Departament de Comunicació. És el meu segon dia, no només és el meu primer acte avui, sinó que és el meu segon dia com a directora, per tant, i em fa molta il·lusió començar donant-vos la benvinguda en nom del departament en aquesta segona edició del Rain Film Festival. L'any passat vaig poder venir com a espectadora i va ser un absolut plaer i va ser il·luminador poder veure no només la part de la recerca, les sessions dedicades a la recerca en intel·ligència artificial generativa, sinó també la part del festival i veure l'ús de la intel·ligència artificial des d'un punt de vista creatiu i el seu impacte en la part de la creació. M'agradaria en aquesta benvinguda destacar 3 aspectes del Rain Film Festival, una mica en la línia del que ja s'ha dit ara. En primer lloc, el seu caràcter interdisciplinar, el fet que no només és fruit d'aquesta col·laboració entre l'àmbit de la cultura, entre el Sonar i una universitat pública, la Pompeu Fabra, sinó que també dins la Pompeu Fabra és una col·laboració entre el Departament d'Ètic i el Departament de Comunicació, i crec que tant la primera com la segona edició és mostra de com de fructífera pot ser aquesta col·laboració i el fet de veure o examinar i pensar una tecnologia com és la intel·ligència artificial des de múltiples perspectives, i poder veure aquest diàleg i aquest diàleg en relació a quin pot ser l'impacte i quin és l'impacte d'aquesta tecnologia en la creació. Al mateix temps també voldria destacar el fet que, com ja també s'ha dit abans, es combini, és a dir, és un festival de cinema, però també, òbviament, aquesta part de recerca, que és amb la que comencem avui, i el fet de combinar acadèmia, indústria, creadors i creadores, el fet de combinar, per tant, també la recerca, l'experimentació, la creació fílmica, és un aspecte que el fa molt únic, el Rain Film Festival, que crec que també és un aspecte a destacar. I, finalment, aquesta perspectiva, podríem dir, crítica, allunyada de visions tecnoutòpiques, podríem dir que, òbviament, també hem de tenir utopia i hem de pensar què ens pot portar la intel·ligència artificial a nivell de la creació, però també sense oblidar les qüestions que abans l'Andrea molt bé comentava, el fet l'impacte que ha tingut la intel·ligència artificial a nivell de la creació, a nivell de l'autoria, com entenem l'autoria, a nivell dels drets d'autor també, a nivell dels drets laborals, biaixos de gènere, biaixos racials i de classe que cal tenir en compte, òbviament, a l'hora d'abordar això i precisament tenir un espai de recerca que ens permeti pensar com és es redefineix el cinema, com es redefineix la creació, com es redefineix l'autoria, però també sense oblidar aquesta part crítica, crec que és un aspecte de la que podem estar orgullosos i crec que és un encert a nivell del festival. Tenim per endavant 4 dies que segur que seran fantàstics. Espero que pugueu disfrutar de totes les activitats vinculades en el festival i també em voldria acabar la intervenció agraint als directors i directores del festival, també a les coordinacions i tota la gent que està fent possible que avui estiguem aquí, que els propers 4 dies puguem disfrutar no només de les peces de creació, sinó també del pensament al voltant de la intel·ligència artificial generativa. Moltes gràcies.
Bon dia a tothom. Jo soc el malvat. A totes les pel·lis, en molts arguments de moltes pel·lis, hi ha un debat entre els malvats i els herois, i el Darth Vader i els Knights. Nosaltres representem el Departament d'Enginyeria. Per què diu que som els malvats? Perquè la majoria de les vegades pensem a la tecnologia com a la que s'ha portat el canvi climàtic. La paraula enginyeria, ve de les màquines d'Aristòteles per fer la guerra i les primeres escoles d'enginyeria eren escoles militars. Per tant, estic molt contents que a la Pompeu Fabra tenim una enginyeria amb una visió humanística, que a la universitat pensem en el benestar planetari. És cert que els enginyers químics han fet que nosaltres que vivim aquest cicle portem plomo, no sé com dir plomo en català, al cos, molt més que totes les generacions anteriors d'humans. Però aquest Rain Festival dona l'oportunitat de debatre en moltes maneres creatives què seran els canvis disruptius de la intel·ligència artificial. Nosaltres voldríem no ser el malo de la pel·lícula, el malvat, voldríem ser una miqueta més el Prometeu, que porta la tecnologia a la humanitat. Ja pagarem el preu que el nostre cavall perdrà les... Però bueno, ens interessa fer tecnologia amb la idea de la paraula que abans enginyer de ser la paraula màquina era ligada a la paraula d'engeni, de ser intel·ligent i imaginatiu. I penso que amb els creadors, els enginyers tenim aquesta cosa en comú. Volem fer intel·ligència imaginativa, humana, amb eines que sí que les creem aquestes eines i en contacte amb els creadors perquè ens facin aquesta reflexió d'on anem amb aquesta tecnologia que és la intel·ligència artificial. Per tant, que en el programa es debati coses com la ètica de la intel·ligència artificial, que les pel·lis mateixes qüestionen el Frankenstein de l'enginyer, i que tinguéssim una oportunitat de mirar-nos a nosaltres mateixos i fer aquesta reflexió, penso que el nostre departament ens ajuda moltíssim a trobar aquesta direcció de que realment la enginyeria, la tecnologia que posem sigui realment al servei del medi ambient, de la humanitat i de la creació. Per tant, moltes felicitacions per donar-nos aquesta oportunitat de reflexionar com enginyers del que estem produint, on va, i molt content de l'èxit que ha tingut i continuarem fent tot el possible per participar i per fer créixer el Rain, que és un orgull per nosaltres com a departament i que penso també per la universitat. Moltes gràcies.
Bé, bon dia a tothom i gràcies per ser en l'auditori del campus del Poble Nou. Jo soc el Frederic Guerrero Soler, el codirector de la secció Research, juntament amb la meva companya, col·lega Coloma Ballester. Estem molt contents de que puguem fer aquesta segona edició i crec que és una gran sort que la puguem organitzar des d'aquí, des de la Universitat Pompeu Fabra, Universitat Pública, com han insistit tant l'Andrea com la resta dels nostres companys. Welcome everyone also to our international guests, Shyam Sundar, Rachel Falconer, Christian Canton, Marcelo Bertalmío, and Carlos Castillo, who are going to be the people who will present the keynotes, our keynote speakers. First, I will make a short introduction in Catalan as my colleagues, and after I will turn again into English, If our international guests don't understand any of the things said by me, I can just after explain them what it's about. But it's about generative AI, not a surprise. Ara fa un any, quan vam començar aquesta aventura, la IA generativa estava en plena eclosió. Tots estàvem plens d'incerteses, preguntes, dubtes, temors, però, com ha dit la Mercè Oliva, també certa fascinació, a vegades lligada amb aquest tecnooptimisme que ens arrossega per l'estètica i per la pròpia atracció de la tecnologia que, com deia la Vanessa Daza, la vicerectora, parafrasejant o citant a Clark, ens sembla màgic. I tothom se sent atret per aquesta màgia i gairebé és una força que no pots reprimir. Unes preguntes i una fascinació per uns models que finalment un any després han inundat les nostres xarxes socials, han inundat parcialment el nostre cinema i també comencem a veure moltes coses a televisió, fins i tot a les notícies. Ha passat un any i una de les coses que més hem vist és que s'han transformat els models generatius. No sé si podíem nosaltres preveure una evolució tan ràpida i tan dràstica de tot el que ha sigut aquesta intel·ligència artificial generativa, que ara són eines complexes, multimodals, amb aparició de noves companyies, de nous models que ens estan dibuixant un horitzó en el qual la IA generativa penetrarà de manera definitiva en gairebé tots els processos industrials. I això ens afectarà particularment, ens afectarà al sector de la comunicació, el qual jo represento, però també afectarà el sector de l'enginyeria, també representat aquí, i a tota la indústria dels continguts en general, ja siguin continguts visuals o continguts àudio, música i so i altres qüestions. La majoria de les preguntes que ens van fer ara fa un any, els que sigueu aquí gairebé es mantenen, però nosaltres continuem amb aquest afany de resoldre-les i les resolem no només a través de la projecció de films que ens interroguen i ens interpel·len i ens fan qüestionar moltes de les coses que tenen a veure amb la IA generativa i amb els processos creatius, sinó que també ho fem des de la recerca, que és aquesta part, aquesta no sé si tercera, quarta pota del mes, que és nosaltres afegim coneixement, nosaltres afegim recerca, perquè creiem que és un procés històric. No sé si ho hem dit avui, però estem en un moment històric en relació a l'evolució de les eines i les tecnologies de producció i de creació i nosaltres el que necessitem és fer una mirada també des de dalt, abstracta, que ens dibuixi també els camins, les qüestions, ja siguin a nivell ètic, de biaixos, etc. Això n'anirem parlant. L'any passat també parlàvem de l'error. No sé si els que éreu aquí recordàveu aquell error lligat als primers models fundacionals, Stable Diffusion 1.5, etc. Jo crec que el refinament de models ha esborrat una miqueta aquest error i ara ja començarà el meu trasllat cap a la presentació del Shyam Sundar. S'ha dit en les intervencions anteriors, però jo una miqueta ho repetiré. Crec que aquest error ha transmutat en una qüestió que l'Andrea ha anomenat agència i que segurament a la presentació del Shyam Sundar anomenarem control. El control com un aspecte definitori i definitiu en els processos de creació audiovisual a partir d'ara. Amb preguntes de qui controla el procés artístic, si són els models, si són les imatges que alimenten els models, si són les catalogacions d'aquestes imatges, no? Les etiquetes d'aquestes imatges, si són els autors, si són les autores. No? Aquesta és una primera gran pregunta. Aquesta pregunta la notem nosaltres quan estem en contacte amb realitzadors cinematogràfics, no? I ens fan conèixer la seva inquietud respecte a la utilització de l'eina, no? Perquè l'autor sempre vol veure reflectit en allò que ha creat. No? I per tant tenim una gran pregunta que la veurem després en el fest i que jo crec que es traslladarà gairebé a tot el nostre festival. No? També ens hem de preguntar, lligat a aspectes ètics proeconòmics, no? Com afecta la centralització de les solucions de la IA generativa a aquest control. Cada cop veiem aquest refinament més gran, però veiem una pèrdua de control que es veu gratificat o recompensat per una estètica més o menys agradable. No? Aquí hi ha una qüestió, diríem, a nivell artístic que és importantíssima. No? Com afecta el control, el procés creatiu, a la idea de creador i d'artista, que creiem que és fonamental, a la satisfacció individual i col·lectiva respecte a allò que estem generant, no? Respecte a aquells missatges i finalment a la recepció de la qual òbviament no ens podem oblidar. No? I crec que com a reflexió particular estem donant una importància molt gran a la creació i a la producció. Per tant, diríem que a qui envia el missatge i el missatge, no? Posant èmfasi òbviament també en els canals, però encara estem oblidant moltíssim la recepció de la IA generativa, que crec particularment que serà un fenomen clau de futur, com les audiències reaccionaran a tot això. No? El control també relacionat amb la homogeneïtzació de l'estètica, de la narració, etc. No? I vincular-ho a una certa tensió que tenim entre sentit i representació explícita, que crec que es veurà molt clarament ara i en el futur. No? Ahir parlàvem en algun moment, no? De la utilització dels models antics com a via de sentit, d'una nova manera, no? Que s'estableix de representar a través de models que no estan refinats i de models que no són pulcres, que no són nets. Jo crec que acabaré aquí la meva primera part, no? Situant-ho també en qüestions que ja ha dit la flamant nova directora del departament, no? Ètica, biaix, estereotip. D'això no ens n'oblidarem mai perquè la tensió entre la utilització pràctica, pragmàtica de la IA generativa i la seva crítica serà constant. Serà constant ara i serà constant en el futur i no ens n'oblidarem perquè és una cosa que no podem oblidar i nosaltres sempre ens trobarem allà en aquesta doble tensió, no? Però molt vigilants amb qüestions que es plantejaran avui com és la discriminació, no? O com és el biaix de gènere, de raça, de classe, que ha estat anomenat anteriorment per la Mercè Oliva. Bé, ho deixo aquí. És un plaer per mi introduir la primera ponència, la que obre també amb nou nom Rainsight, no? Que és la ponència del nostre col·lega Shyam Sundar. Shyam Sundar is James P. Gimiro Professor of Media Effects at Penn State University, founder of the Media Effects Research Laboratory, and director of the Center for Socially Responsible Artificial Intelligence, devoted to the development and application of AI with an emphasis on its social and ethical implications. Estem aquí, no? He earned his doctoral and master's degrees in communication and psychology, and he holds a bachelor's degree in communication and engineering. We have a lot of things in common. Professor Sundar will talk later about that. His current work is quite interdisciplinary. It has been mentioned by my colleagues, interdisciplinarity. We have here Vladimir Estevil from the engineering school, and we are the people of the communication faculty. So I think that this interdisciplinarity is in the rain too, and you're representing absolutely this mix between engineering and communication. He teaches courses in the psychology of communication technology, media theory and research methodology, and empirical work investigates social and psychological effects of human-computer interaction and computer and mediated communication. His work has appeared in a large number of leading journals. I need an hour to read all the titles of the journals, so I will miss this part of my speech. has testified before U.S. Congress as an expert witness and delivered talks at several universities in the United States and all over the world. Now you can add Barcelona to the list, yeah. And my last sentence is that Sundar's last works on AI have inspired a whole generations of researchers. I'm among them, yeah. So it's a pleasure to read your works and to be inspired and to be introduced into the world of AI, generative AI, yeah. Because it's somehow new for us. It's not new for the engineering school, but it's new for us. When we started talking about AI, it was not easy, yeah. But now we feel that this technology is attracting and we cannot forget about it. Professor Sundar is going to present Rethinking Cinema in the Age of AI. Repensar el cinema en l'època de la IA generativa. Professor, the floor, or better, the control, is yours. Thank you very much. Moltes gràcies.
All right, how's everybody doing this morning? Good, okay, awesome. Okay, so I'm not going to speak in Catalan at all, nor in Spanish. It's going to be entirely in English, and sometimes I'm accused of speaking too fast. So pardon me if it's a little too fast for you, but hopefully we have some good translation going. Hopefully you have a chance to review the recording later, perhaps. And I'm going to jump straight into the fundamentals of my talk. I come from a media effects background, which means I study the effects of media on the social psychological aspects of individuals. So we essentially do psychological research, often experimental research, that looks at how media affects the people psychologically. And so ultimately, a lot of the rethinking about different types of media, including cinema, in the context of AI, for me, is from the perspective of the audience and the audience mind, so to speak. So with that in mind, here's kind of the general outline of my talk. I'd like to briefly go over what generative AI can do for us and how it has affected film industry and filmmaking, and what are some different perspectives of filmmakers and audiences. And then I'd like to introduce you to some conceptual and theoretical aspects. That's really what I'm known for. I'm known more as a theoretician and an empirical psychologist. And so I'd like to introduce you to the notion of AI as cue and AI as action, and finally close out with a few words about socially responsible use of AI, especially in this domain. To begin with, there are lots of generative AI tools now, all of a sudden. I know that most of you noticed generative AI with the arrival of ChatGPT just under 2 years ago. But then there have been so many other generative AI tools that have translated text to not only text, but also to image, to video, and so forth. And one of the tools that we've been using now for quite some time is this tool called Synthesia. I don't know if you've heard of this tool. This is something that as a psychologist, we used to actually have actors who would come to our lab and act out scenes for us to record and then show it to our study participants. Now we manufacture these stimuli within minutes by using this tool.
Hey, I'm Alex, and here's a quick Synthesia product demo. To begin, choose from a wide variety of fully customizable video templates. Then, select your preferred AI avatar. Now, type in text in over 120 languages.
And choose a narration style or local accent.
Next, start editing your video. Easily change colors to match your brand identity and upload your logo or other brand assets that you can reuse for future videos.
So you get the idea. So basically you can type in the text of whatever you want the avatar to speak, and the avatar can be any number of avatars, and we choose from these avatars, or also we can upload our own avatars, and then it'll talk the text that you upload. And we found this very useful in our studies and have been using it now for over 5 years, ever since Synthesia came about. And so here, for example, is a study in which we wanted to vary the race of the job candidate from an African American to a Hispanic to a Caucasian, and we find that we wanted to see if there are biases in the way people evaluate these candidates for the position. So the exact same text, the exact same qualification is read out by these 3 different avatars or actors. But the participants in our study don't know that these are AI-created avatars. They think it's real people. And for us, it's a very convenient way of doing these kinds of studies, where previously we would have to spend hours recording them, making sure they're the exact same way they act and all of that. Now we can, coordinate that within minutes by using Synthesia. So what does this example mean for the larger industry of filmmaking, for video, for cinema in general? Is essentially what you all see now, and what this festival is about, and what you're going to see more of this afternoon, is AI-generated films, entirely AI-generated movies that you're seeing more and more of. And these are very good production values, as you can tell. You can have fantastic scenery, things that is very hard to generate from scratch in the real world, but you can produce them within seconds by just writing the right kind of text and showing these scenes that are very panoramic, very big, very large in scope, and also in many ways very real. You can see very real looking human beings, cars, and also spacecrafts and things like that. And you also have all kinds of dialogues. This is a movie.
Humanity's own creation sparked a nuclear inferno,
AI.
turning our vibrant Earth into a solemn testament of our own folly. The world as we knew, it was engulfed in nuclear fire, marking the end of an era.
The sole survivor clung to a vision, a blueprint for forging a new future from the ashes of the old.
As the dust settles on a world forever changed, a new generation of beings emerges. After 4 billion years of relentless evolution, Earth finally witnessed the dawn of its first cyborg society.
So you get the idea. These are sort of alien themes very often, and there are lots of movies. I can show you more. You'll see more of it this afternoon, I'm sure, as part of this festival. And you can see that they are a particular type of themes right now. They're all mostly about AI themselves, ironically, these AI-generated movies. And they're also about aliens. So there's a kind of a genre that's emerging, if you will. But I also see that there is recent emergence of very human films, like this one, which is Frost from last year, where it's really about human emotions with human-looking actors. They are not really human actors, but you can see that they are empathizing and they're talking about it in very human terms. And you'll see that in this particular film, there is actually character development and dialogue that you don't associate necessarily with these typical alien type movies. And here's this little scene from this movie. You can see them setting up the scene as this very out of the world kind of setting. But when you look at close-ups, you actually see people conversing and talking.
It's so fucking cold. So fucking cold.
So anyway, I don't want to spend too much time giving you the previews of these movies. Like I said, you'll see lots more of them. But just so that we are all on the same page, I just want to demo, or at least show you the demo that Sora released, which was earlier this year, about how they made this progress with, you can take text, like you can just put in this text saying, I want to see a cartoon kangaroo disco dancing, and it'll produce that instantaneously, right? So these are some examples of different types of videos that it can generate. So text to video took a giant leap this year because of Sora, and Sora, of course, is still being tested. But the quality so far seems to be very promising. But those of us who've experimented with it also know its problems, and we also know the challenges that there are. But I think it opens the window into all that is possible with filmmaking in the future. And you can see little video samples being seeding further video samples, and it's training in real time. If your video is showing only part of it, it can fill in the rest of it and show the full video, for example. It can do all kinds of things that normally it would take a lot of production to be able to achieve. It can understand language, as we talked about. You can just have to type something and it'll produce a video of that text. And it can also animate text, like you see on the right-hand side, where you basically take Sora and then you're animating it, or you take a wave and it animates that. All of this is possible. It can extend existing video. You give it a little bit of video and then it can complete the story, if you will. It can allow you to do video editing. It can change the background from this kind of a background to more of a lush jungle background. It can provide more 3D consistency. So there are lots of functionalities that you can get out of this, not just in terms of translating text to movies, but all kinds of post-production things as well that you can do, which a lot of people are realizing in the industry. So in general, just to summarize all the different ways in which it can affect filmmaking and video and cinema, it can, of course, automate a lot of things like script writing and analysis. It can do lots of video editing on automation. CGI generation, computer-generated imagery is that much simpler now and faster and more efficient. And it can allow you to do lots of things with existing footage that would otherwise be very time-consuming. And so in many ways, it brings up efficiencies that allow sort of lay persons to become filmmakers in a way. It democratizes filmmaking. And also it changes the way filmmaking is done. It changes the way filmmakers tell stories. So in that way, it's very disruptive as a technology. It redefines how you tell a story. Used to be it would be in the mind of the storyteller or the writer and the screenplay. And then there are several people who are involved in that translation process. But now it's basically what you have in mind. You can put it down on paper and it can generate the video. It can craft realistic environments. It can transform characters. And can create all kinds of fantasy situations without the need for actually making actors do these things. And so there's been a lot of press about this, especially in Hollywood. There's generally a kind of a pessimistic note that's being struck by the Hollywood press about how it's killing jobs in Hollywood, and all kinds of jobs from script writing to acting to production is being disrupted. And of course, the numbers also tell a story. Over 200,000 jobs have been disrupted in one way or another in the entertainment industry alone. And when you think about it, you can see why. Because in the olden days, before generative AI, this is how movie directors envisioned a scene. They would create elaborate storyboards. They would draw with their hands these kinds of scenarios, right? And like Todd Anderson, who's a regular storyboard creator for Coen Brothers, said, you can save all the usual problems ahead of shooting by working with a good artist and a floor plan, which means they needed lots of artists. They needed armies of artists to do these things, right? But now you can basically do this without any of those artists, without location scouting, without mood board. You have to create a mood board in the olden days, right? You don't have to do these things. You don't have to create short lists, blocking diagrams. All of that's gone, which means lots and lots of jobs in this domain are pretty much lost, or at least have to be significantly redefined to fit the digital realm. Now it's all about prompting. There are new sets of skills, new ways in which you can convey the idea into film. And here's a popular AI film that you might have seen using Sora that was done. You can see there's a high school scene. It's a cafeteria, and it's a very common American theme. You'll see this in lots of old movies like Grease and so forth. And so Paul Trillo, who shot this, basically reflected on this process, on how he prompted to be able to achieve this. And he basically said, you can make things happen by exactly specifying, do this, then this, and you can pretty much write a script for Sora to interpret and then give you its feedback. But when you look at his prompting, you can see the prompting is pages and pages and pages. You can see that it's very specific. He will say things like, do this vignette in a warm vintage tone. The shot is captured on a 35mm film, Fuji film stock from the 1990s with anamorphic 24mm lens. This kind of detail, of course, needs technical knowledge and background and a bit of history. But to be able to direct Sora to do all these things takes skill. And so prompting is not simply about saying, give me a film. It's about specifying every step of the way, every aspect. And you can see pages and pages of prompts for like a 2-minute clip. And so this kind of thing that generative AI has kind of brought into the fore, raises larger questions, not just redefines the way films are done, but also makes us wonder, is this creative? Is this what we mean by creativity? In general, conventional creativity is about two things. One is about taking an intellectual leap, moving forward in a cognitive way, and another one is much more emotional. It's about affective sphere. So it's all about your lived experience, right? So we, in an article last year, were talking about this and thinking about creativity and originality. And it seems to me that when we think about creativity in the context of generative AI, all we are doing is juxtaposing existing data in new ways and essentially directing the system to do that and to produce seemingly coherent content. And so this is not necessarily something that Sora inherently understands, but rather you as the kind of the director is pulling together different pieces of data to make it a coherent piece. And so in some ways, this stretches our traditional notion of creativity because it's not coming out of our soul, our lived experience. It's basically saying, do this in the style of that. And also, to what extent what the machine produces, is that something that is distinct from human originality? And so this raises all kinds of interesting questions because machines are ultimately parrots, what they call stochastic parrots, because what they are doing is generating content based on statistical and probabilistic information without actual reference to meanings. Machines don't necessarily understand or have that deep background, a personal background with it. But all of this may not matter, all of this question about creativity may not matter if the audiences don't care, right? The important question is, how will the audience react? And we used to think that CGI was the end of the world, that cinema would not be the same without CGI. But it has evolved now to the point where, all the naysayers who used to complain about CGI in the early days, all these headlines about how CGI is ruining modern cinema, are no longer true because CGI is now part of our fabric of the cinema. And the same thing has been happening now with generative AI. There are lots of intense discussions, online forums, where people talk about how, at some level it's tedious. It kind of runs the same course every time. Some of the examples I showed you of the films, they have a certain sameness to them, you might have noticed. And so they complain about that kind of lack of variety and originality. But then there are others who talk about this as being just the beginning, and it can spark new ways in which we can think about creating cinema in the future, and also people actually feeling more emotion than they would ordinarily with human actors in the case of AI actors. So there are people who are buying into it even more deeply with these, because you can nuance the emotional expression much more than even an actor is capable of doing, right? You can push an AI actor to do significant acting that you may not be able to push a human actor with their acting limitations and so forth. So in general, the question, will viewers trust AI generated media as much as human made media, is a question that I've been thinking about. And if you look at all the stories and anecdotes that have come about, in general, if they notice something is off, if there's some rendering problem, that's when it kind of breaks the presence and then it ruins the film for them. Or if you tell people that it's AI generated, then it ruins it for them, right? But if they don't know that it's AI generated, and if it works pretty well, they don't seem to mind at all. They love these films. Lots of CGI films are blockbusters, essentially, right? And we all watch animated films, anime and so forth are million-dollar, multi-billion-dollar affairs. So that's something that has changed to a point where we don't now even notice. Another thing that's significant is also the context of viewing. It used to be that we would go to a movie theater like this and watch a movie together on a big screen, right? This is not how most people watch movies anymore. How do we watch movies these days? We sit somewhere at some random place and watch it on a mobile phone, right? Now, again, this was a big point of controversy among filmmakers. David Lynch, one of the famous filmmakers, recorded this little video which went viral. Some of you might have seen. This was, almost 20 years ago now, right?
Now, if you're playing the movie on a telephone, you will never in a trillion years experience the film. You'll think you have experienced it, but you'll be cheated. It's such a sadness that you think you've seen a film on your fucking telephone. Get real.
And so this was a popular meme because everybody responded to this and said, yeah, this is ridiculous watching a movie on a phone. But now the reality is most people, most of the time, watch movies on their phones thanks to the advancement of the earbuds, right? You get that real sound and so forth. So it's pretty, it's transformed the way in which we experience film as well. And so one of the things that bothers me, or at least that I'm thinking about, is how we process film. How do we cognitively process film? So David Lynch says you will not get the same level of presence when you watch it on your phone as you would in a movie theater on a big screen. But now we need to think about the reality of 21st century cinema viewing. In general, audiences are multitasking. We are doing multiple things. Often we are second screening. We are tweeting about the film we are just watching, right? All kinds of things that are going on. And then you're also checking in with other feedback about the movie. Audiences are also involved in the act of, they're not as involved in the act of watching movies as they would be in a movie theater. So the involvement level is low. And then they're processing films heuristically, which means based on rules of thumb. Heuristic means basically just mental shortcuts rather than thinking through effortfully, systematically about the content of the film. So a lot of these kind of gimmickry, they will be enamored by rather than more serious content embedded in the dialogues and the nuances of acting and so forth. So in general, what matters most is cues, the kinds of cues that we provide through our films. And so I'd like to spend some time talking with you about AI as a cue. AI itself is a cue. Just like we said, when people find out that it's AI-made movie, they are not so hot as compared to when they're not told, even though it's AI-generated, they would enjoy the movie. This is because we have in our head a heuristic, a mental shortcut called the machine heuristic, which is the idea that when a machine does something, it's very objective, it's precise, it's accurate, it's very secure. And so we kind of overtrust automation. There are many examples in our world where, for example, if something is an automation, we trust it more than when a human handles it. Whether it's piloting an aircraft or managing your teller, your money on an automatic teller machine, and so forth. But there's also a phenomenon of undertrust in automation. Even when AI can do a good job, we tend to undertrust it on occasion. We have this algorithmic aversion sometimes because it sometimes does not produce the optimal result. And so this is what we call negative machine heuristic, because we also think that machines, while they are accurate, precise, and objective, but they're also cold, unemotional, they're very mechanical, and so we have these stereotypes about it, even though nowadays the modern machines may not be necessarily as cold and unemotional as you would think. So a few years ago, this is almost now 10 years ago, we did the study about Hollywood robot syndrome, where we were studying the effects of media on people's adoption of robots, especially older adults who had been around for a while, for several decades of Hollywood films, and we wanted to see how the recollection of Hollywood films affected their intention. So we asked them to recall different kinds of robots from Hollywood films over the years. And of course, some robots that they recalled were very high on sympathy, on evoking sympathy, like Wall-E, and some were very low on evoking sympathy, like Terminator, and a whole bunch in between, right? And similarly, on other features like machine likeness, some identified robots that are very machine-like, not so machine-like, and in between. And then in even human likeness, there was quite a variety. Very human-like, like Terminator, not so human-like, like Forbidden Planet, and those in between as well. So in general, when you think about it, the more robots they recall, the lower the anxiety toward robots. But the more sympathetic the robot, the lower the anxiety toward robot as well. The more human-like the robot, the lower the anxiety. And then the anxiety was related to adoption intentions and so forth. So the idea here is that when things look real, when things look like human, when things have human-like emotion, like sympathy, then we fall for what we call a realism heuristic, which is the idea that seeing is believing. When I'm seeing something, I believe it. And this is what is happening increasingly with advancements in generative AI, is the technology is advanced to a point where AI actors look like real actors, right? And AI-generated scenes look like real scenes. And so we will fall for this heuristic or mental shortcut of realism, or seeing as believing, and therefore we will trust the content as being high quality and credible or real. So these are, just two examples. The machine heuristic that I mentioned earlier and the realism heuristic are two examples of how affordances of modern media, like modality and agency, can affect our perceptions, can affect the way we consider content, media content. And this is all laid out in a larger model. That this is my most cited work called MAIN model, Modality, Agency, Interactivity, and Navigability model, which highlights all the different types of heuristics that you might think of. And so you can just see that realism and machine heuristic were just two examples of this that I mentioned. And this kind of evaluation of content, this kind of perceptual effect of content is one part of a larger theory of interactive media effects that I have proposed back in 2015, where we are talking about cues on the interface affecting triggering these heuristics and affecting our psychology of how we perceive the world, but also affordances invite us to act with them. Affordances actually make us act. So interactive media, in general, not only have stimuli, cues in front of us, but also action possibility. And so just to give you a quick example, in the case of social media, for example, some of the cues that you'll see are number of likes by others, number of retweets and so forth. Those can trigger heuristics like bandwagon heuristic. A lot of people like this, therefore this must be a good movie, for example. But the action is where you actually share something or you actually comment on the movie, and that is an example of you acting in a more willful and more present fashion. So in general, that actual acting can provide more agency to users. And so this is the idea behind the revolution, the internet revolution that happened around the turn of the century, where previously communication was all transmission oriented. The sender used to send a message to the receiver, but interactive media made it possible for the receiver in a way to become sort of the sender. And so as a result, what we're doing is we're using media to collaborate. Both senders and receivers are working together, but both technology and the people are working together. And this is now suddenly challenged by AI, because AI has taken an upper hand in terms of how much it takes over in the process of communication. And so I discussed this dialectic, that this tension between machine agency and human agency in this article that was published in 2020, which is about essentially talking about resolving this tension between human agency and machine agency. And for doing so, I do rely on that theory that I just talked about, which has a cue effect and an action effect, or a cue route and an action route. And both these are important for us to think about resolving this tension. So in terms of the cue effect, when you think about the cues that AI sends out, one of the things you need to think about is how does AI produce images? So when you go to Stable Diffusion and you say, give me an attractive person, right? It'll give you an attractive person that you can immediately put into your movie or your video. But what you don't stop to think is that every time you ask this system for an attractive person, it's going to give you a stereotypically attractive person. It's going to be a young, it's going to be a light-skinned individual. And this is something that we may not notice, but we might be perpetuating the stereotype. And this, can happen at many different levels, even outside of filmmaking. There was this Asian MIT student who used a playground AI to ask for a professional headshot for using in her LinkedIn profile. And what did it do? It made her lighter skinned and have blue eyes, right? So it changed her to look like its stereotypical notion of what is a professional picture for LinkedIn. And so this is the kind of thing. So yesterday I just was playing around and I asked for a house in Spain. And these are the kinds of images. I asked for it again and again, 10 times, very similar images. You see that? And a film director or somebody who's working on this location is wanting to get this quick screen grab, they're going to go with whatever it's going to give you. They're not going to stop and think. But the problem is this is not reality. This is probably the reality of how most Spanish people live, right? But no generative AI tool is going to produce this. I got this out of Google search. And so in some ways, this can have detrimental effects as a cue effect. Bloomberg News last summer had this expose where they went to Stable Diffusion and asked for images of professionals. And then when it produced the images of professionals, they color-coded the skin color, and they found that high-paying professions like architect, lawyer, CEO, politician, and so forth, most of the images it produced were lighter-skinned, very few dark-skinned individuals. But for low-paying professions like social worker, fast food worker, most of the images it produced were darker skinned. Do you see that? And the same was true with gender. Most of the high-paying professions, you could see it was males. That's the dark green here. Very few females. And most of the lower-paying professions, like housekeeper, 100% were women. Social worker, close to 100% were women, right? So this is kind of how it sees the world. This is how generative AI sees the world. When you think about color photograph of an architect, this is what you get. A color photograph of a cashier. You can see mostly brown people, mostly women. Color photograph of CEO, white guys in suit and tie, right? Color photograph of a dishwasher, brown people, right? So again, these are all part of the training data. It reflects systemic biases in our history. It's based on training data from real people. So if you thought humans were biased, generative AI is even worse, right? And so this is the kind of thing that can cause all kinds of harms in a number of different domains, but especially in the domain of media and cinema, it can have social detriments. It can reinforce stereotypes. It can lead to more confirmation bias. If you thought that social workers were predominantly brown-skinned individuals, it's going to confirm, that kind of bias. It can have dignitary harms for people of color and for minorities, and it can, have other kinds of downstream effects that I won't go into here. But in general, we don't question this very much. That's my concern. Often we are engaged in trusting, we are using these tools so that we can get something else done, and we overtrust these tools to produce kind of the image that we want or the video that we want, and we tend to over-rely on them. Or on the other hand, sometimes we under-trust them, when it goes seriously wrong. But both are wrong in many ways. We need to be using them intelligently, not over-trust or under-trust. Instead, we should be calibrating our trust. That is, you should be able to figure out what is good about generative AI and how to use it in an intelligent way. And for that, I lean on the bottom part of this theory, which is about the action route. Instead of going with the cues and heuristics that are triggered, like realism heuristic, instead go with kind of the more interactive aspect, where you're basically engaged in negotiating agency. There's a social exchange between you and the system. There's mutual augmentation. You enhance the system by ground truthing it, and then there's a bit of a synergy. So this is true at both levels, both for filmmakers and for viewing audiences. When you think about it, humans perceive intelligent technology as agents, both filmmakers and audiences. And both agencies can be constructed, can be co-constructed in the context of human-computer communication. And so technology that affords human agency, that is, gives you a chance to intervene without negative consequences of misrepresentation, like the ones that I gave you examples of. And from a viewer's perspective, privacy intrusion is another big issue that we see with all these advanced AI systems. And so in general, this kind of agency is necessary. This negotiation is necessary for filmmakers and audience members, but at different levels. And so what we are really thinking about is doing some kind of a social exchange where you're advancing your agenda, whether you're making a film or watching a film, at minimal cost, which means you're reducing your production costs. If you're a filmmaker, if you're an audience member, you're reducing your search costs so that you don't have to search. Netflix will automatically figure out what you like and personalize the experience for you, and you'd be able to have some say in it. The idea is you're mutually working together. So as a Netflix user, you're able to customize, saying, give me this, don't give me that, or I like this movie because of this, therefore give me, these kinds of things. So you're giving the system an opportunity for ground truthing based on your personal and individual experience. And the same is true for filmmakers too, with their prompting and reprompting that I showed you pages and pages of from Paul Trillo's example. So this is kind of the idea of enabling aspect of AI. It's not a symbolic aspect like cues, but it enables us to work with AI. And so the quality of the collaboration is very important at this level. How we collaborate. A lot of us, on a daily basis, talk to chatbots, talk to smart speakers like Alexa. We figured out how to talk to them. We figured out that Alexa is good for certain things, like giving us the weather, but Alexa can be bad at certain other things, and so we don't bother Alexa with that kind of question, right? So like that, the idea is we need to come to some kind of a working arrangement, and so the level of interactivity that they offer gives us a chance to express our agency. If they don't give us interactivity, we won't have a way to respond or talk to them. So you see, for example, emergence of interactive movies or gamification of movies even, where you get a chance to kind of tinker with the plot. You could do that. You can also customize the way you view films and the way you specify to Netflix, like I mentioned earlier. So these are some examples of enabling aspect of AI, where ultimate goal is to achieve a sort of synergy between you and the system. The system almost has a relationship with you. It's like an interpersonal relation. You are dependent on it, and it's dependent on you. There's a certain kind of coupled collaboration. And so for filmmakers, it can be a very good mechanism for achieving efficiencies of cost and optimizing resources and focusing more on creativity and storytelling. For filmmakers, they can spend more time thinking more creatively rather than on the logistics of set design and color combination and all of those things, or trying to communicate with artists on storyboarding things and stuff like that. And the same could be true for audience members. For audience members, AI can keep improving based on your feedback. AI can become much better at personalizing information or movies for you, whereas for humans the advantage would be that you have a better user experience and engagement. And so the ultimate message here is to try and figure out ways to calibrate user trust based on the interface cues. And keep in mind, those interface cues can be unfounded. It can lead to unfounded trust heuristics, like we might casually rely on AI's products as kind of a reflection of reality. And so we need to rigorously warrant those cues. We need to have a systematic way of auditing them. And the idea is to promote socially responsible AI by allowing for interactivity, by allowing for clear communication of its characteristics. Like the system could tell us why it gave that image for a housekeeper, or why it gave you that image for a home in Spain. And give you some rationale for it. It might say that this is the stereotypical traditional home in Spain. This is no longer the same type of home you'll find if you go to a city like Barcelona. So it can give you more information, more context as to why it's giving you the kinds of images it's giving you. And this will allow us to calibrate our trust. It will allow the user to say, okay, this is a stereotypical image. If I want to portray traditional Spain, I might use this home. But if I want to portray modern Spain, I might use a different kind. And so these are different mechanisms that are emerging. From a filmmaker's perspective, things like prompting is a way to provide feedback to the system. From an audience perspective, things like customization is a way to provide feedback to the system. And all of this will help us calibrate our trust and allow for good collaboration between the users and the systems, and therefore achieve that kind of mutual agency and help us negotiate the tension between machine agency and human agency. With that, let me stop, and I'll be happy to take any and all questions. Thank you for your attention.
Much. Is it working? Hello. Thank you very much, Professor Sundar. Would you be so kind to sit here with me, and probably Coloma, she's not here. Okay, we have 5 minutes. First, thanks for this excellent presentation. Brilliant. Yeah, a lot of information, I think, there. So probably the public will have a lot of questions for you, but let me just ask you a couple of things I'll be interested to be answered by you. The first one is I just read a paper written by you relating distrust in humans means trust in AI. Distrust in humans is let's say a controversial marvel. Yeah. The second question is, what about you are an expert in media effects? What about the effects of the creations, the content generated by AI on the self? Because this is something that we are witnessing, millions of people creating content for themselves. And what happens is in this process of reception of the same content that has been created by you with an audience that is not used to create. Probably it's the first time they are really creating things. Yeah. And the third one, I know it's a lot of questions. One of the dystopian horizons we can think about, it's platforms being the creators. Not Netflix, not Amazon, but OpenAI and others. Does it mean that for some audiences, and maybe you have the answer, the author is not relevant? And the only thing relevant is content that now can be algorithmically generated by the models. Yeah, so 3 questions, I repeat: distrust in humans, effects on the self, and platforms as creators. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those thought-provoking questions. The first one that Frederick referred to is a study that we did a couple of years ago that showed that it's more of a survey-type finding where we found that people who chronically distrust other humans tend to trust AI more, which is, I think, interesting. And it was published in a major journal in our field because this tells us that at some level, we have this positive machine heuristic that I was referring to, on steroids. If in fact you are the kind of person who has dispositional distrust, if you're the kind of person who's always paranoid and you don't trust people, strangely enough, you happen to trust technology, which you would think is sort of paradoxical, but it seems that they find comfort in the fact that technology is objective and secure, when in fact it probably is not, right? So in some ways, I think of that as a fallacy, a cognitive fallacy, which had to be brought up, and that's what we did discover in the study and publish it. The second question about producing your own video, producing your own content, this is now not any longer new, right? We've had this now for a while with YouTube, people uploading videos. We have Instagram influencers and things like that. So it's a phenomenon where it's democratized filmmaking, democratized content production. So in many ways, I see this as a positive change. Used to be that media were in the hands of just the elites, just a few people who had access to mass media broadcasting channels, and they were the only ones who could broadcast, whether it's news or entertainment. They had the upper hand. But now every person on the street can potentially become a star with their own YouTube channel and produce that. So in many ways, a lot of our research show that this increases their agency. User agency is highest with these kinds of self-creation tools that you've seen, and it also affords expression. The kinds of expression that are not allowed on mainstream media are now possible through these alternate channels, channels that are informal but still pretty influential. If you are saying something important, you can still get millions of people to follow you. And your third question was, remind me. Oh yeah, the platforms as creators. So the idea that content is more significant than the author is something that right now everybody is scared about and are freaking out about, and probably rightly so. However, as you saw in this example with prompting is a particular skill. It's very, very detailed. It's very nuanced. And if you don't know what you want to get out of the system, you're not going to get it. And so it is significantly authorial. There is an author's voice behind that content. And even though generative AI might give you some standard video in response to a standard prompt, to get more meaningful, in a video out, you need to have much more meaningful prompt. And so in many ways, it's about the source behind that particular video. And this goes back to our own celebration of sources. As humans, we've always valued an original creative source. So for example, the Picasso paintings in the Picasso Museum here might cost you millions of dollars, right? But somebody outside on the street can do the exact same replica of the exact same painting that imitates Picasso to a T, but we would pay them 100 euros maybe, right, at the most. Why? Because it's not the same source. It's not the same author. And so the original author's voice, matters even now. And so I think it's important to kind of assert that with these new tools to say who prompted and what way they prompted. And I think a lot of people you're seeing online are doing that, and they're sharing their prompts to be able to say this is copyrightable. And so this raises other questions about intellectual property, which I'm not an expert in, but I think these are important things to think about as well.
Thank you very much. Tenim una miqueta de temps per un parell o tres de preguntes de l'audiència. Hi ha un micro d'audiència, sí?
Thank you so much for your inspiring keynote. I have one question. You were talking about the ways to customize more and more, which is very good if you are a Netflix user, but it also has the problem of creating narrow-minded perspectives, over-customizing, and some bubbles. And there, I think, has to enter the human creativity, because we, until now, are, in comparison with AI, capable to introduce random or complex things, because the AI has more the tendency to have confirmation bias or to create narrow systems. Could you talk a little bit about this item? And also, do you think that in the nearer future, AI will be able also to include more complex, more random, more complex things which actually happened without being inside the system already?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I think the concern you raise is a concern that has been raised by most prominently by a scholar called Cass Sunstein, who wrote a book called Republic.com around the turn of the century. And he actually was very concerned about so-called echo chambers and these kinds of, and then there's a book on filter bubbles that came out 10 years later that also talk about how we are all filtering and we are living in these bubbles. Now, a lot of scientific research has now shown that they are not true, that these are only true on paper or in theory, but in reality, when you look at how people are consuming content and what kinds of content they are encountering, it's not so narrowly focused as you would think. So that's one empirical fact. But on the other hand, the other thing that's very desirable from your perspective is that in the recommendation systems literature, in the field of recommendation systems, which is what Netflix and YouTube and others do when they recommend movies or they autoplay the next, like TikTok autoplays the next video and so forth. One of the big things that has come up in the last few years is the concept of serendipity, which is you need to be able to see something that you would not normally go looking for, but you would get that. And that's what keeps your interest going. If you're seeing the same thing over and over, and that's something that you saw with some of the comments with generative AI tools, is people say, oh, this has a certain sameness to it, I'm getting bored. And you're not going to retain audiences. So no platform is going to survive without a smart recommendation algorithm that would factor serendipity into it. And so even though you might customize it, how the system personalizes for you is going to be based partly on your customized preferences, but also partly on pushing that boundary further and further so that you discover more things than to say, oh, I like this and I like that. I didn't know I liked this, but I like that. So we make a distinction in my work between customization and personalization. Customization is tailoring done by the user. Personalization is tailoring done by the system. And both kind of go hand in hand in order to achieve the kind of ideal that you're talking about, which is not only do we get to what we want to experience, but we also get to see things that we would enhance our, our palette, so to speak. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Tenim temps per una pregunta molt curta allà dalt, Gaini. I si us sembla bé acabarem perquè hem de donar pas al següent conferenciant.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm really interested in the concept of trust, so I've got two questions, if you will. First of all, there seems to be a shift from the visual to the verbal because we're so based on prompts, right? So I was wondering if you could say anything about the fact that by using more and more verbal skills or by being aware of the accuracies needed of prompts, do you think that a certain criticality of images can be evoked because we realize that even if it looks realistic, there's so much complexity behind it, and maybe some people who are less used to visual analysis will be more aware through that verbal prompt? That's one question. And the other question is, even though AI images are photorealistic, there's also a huge sphere of non-photorealistic images that we now accept as true. And I'm thinking of animated documentaries and infographics. So where does that fall? Because if we're now trusting non-photorealistic images, but also photorealistic images, where does that leave us?
Yeah, I think both are very interesting questions. So in general, when we are thinking about visual versus verbal, you're absolutely right that when we are articulating things with text, we are much more systematically processing. So text, by definition, is linear, right? We are setting the scene, we are writing everything down one by one. It's a linear progression of thought, whereas with visuals, everything hits at you at the same time. So we cannot describe everything in one after the other in serial fashion, but it comes to you at a parallel fashion. So our processing itself is much more systematic and thoughtful when you do it with text. And so if you're a person producing a visual with the help of text, as in the case of generative AI, you have much more thought put into it. However, keep in mind that you could be a bad actor and you could play a lot of mischief. You could create very nuanced fake stories by prompting very carefully with the text, right? So in that way, it enhances your ability to fool more people, to make more people trust it. And so in that respect, it's only from the perspective of the sender that it's much more thoughtful and thought-provoking rather than from the receiver's end. As far as the fascination with animated and cartoon characters and animes, like we talked about, they're not necessarily photorealistic, but we still, believe in them. Now, that is a reflection of human psychology. Used to be, we've done studies back, in the 1950s, there were studies done with geometric shapes. People would see geometric shapes and they would interpret intentions to those geometric shapes. They would actually attribute intentions to those shapes. So there is this foundational tendency among humans to anthropomorphize inanimate characters. And so my advisor back in the day is well known for this paradigm called CASA, computers are social actors, where he basically showed that people treat computers as if they are social actors, even though they did not have any social skills. It's not like they were willingly anthropomorphizing. It's not like suspension of disbelief. That's a different concept. It's simply that a human script is only one script, which is how to relate to other humans in human terms. And so we apply that whether it's a bunny rabbit or a cartoon character. So we are wired to be social, and therefore we tend to act socially, not so much because we are being fooled into thinking that.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Professor Sundar. I'm sure that we have tons of questions for you. Maybe later in the coffee break, you can ask him whatever you want. Yeah. So it's time for my colleague Coloma Ballester. Coloma.
Hi, good morning. First of all, thank you very much for joining this research Rainsight session. I'm Coloma Ballester, mathematician, coordinator of the Intelligent Multimodal Vision Analysis Research Group at the Department of Engineering. All my life doing research in understanding vision, reproducing vision, in an automatic artificial way, let's say, currently complemented with other modalities such as audio, natural language, etc. Now it is absolutely my pleasure to welcome and introduce you to Marcelo Bertalmío, the next speaker. Marcelo is both a very renowned researcher in video models, imaging, vision science, and computer vision, and also a filmmaker. Yeah. He has been working in many institutions and countries around the world. First in Universidad de la República in Uruguay, University in Minnesota. I'm sure I'm missing something, but yeah, in many places. Also at the University of Pompeu Fabra, where he was full professor, but I don't know why he decided to leave. And
I can tell you.
And since 2021,
yes,
he's at the Spanish National Research Council, CSIC, in Madrid. He has a long list of achievements. He's in the Stanford list of the world top 2% scientists ranked in the top 0.1 of his area. His publication, he has a long list of publications with many citations. He has many prizes. I don't know if telling you them, but many prizes. Prize of Society for Industry and Applied Mathematics for co-authoring the most relevant image processing award in a period. He has received many prizes, the FEMLA Prize, the Siemens-based Paper Award, the Ramon y Cajal Fellowship, the CREA. He's editor of many journals, has obtained ERCs. Wow, has co-authored patents, 5 European patents and 1 Japanese patent, has been involved and led many research projects related to film industries, and also co-founded a startup who provided solutions for cinema post-production, has written books, image processing for cinema, vision model for HDR and WCG imaging, and edited another book. As a filmmaker, at least, to the best of my knowledge, he's the creator, director, not actor, but of at least two films, Los Días con Ana y Ruido. Very nice films. I met Marcelo for the first time in 1998, where both of us were in Paris at the Institut Henri Poincaré, and there we started working in painting, filling in these occlusions. He was the first step of a long collaboration, and with that, let me welcome him again. And today he will talk about vision model for cinema. Marcelo, the floor is yours. Let's welcome him.
Gracias. Well, Muchas gracias, Coloma. Me ha llegado mucho tu presentación. Gracias. Vale, pues nada, soy Marcelo. Hablaré en inglés, pero quería saludaros a todos antes. Y nada, pues empiezo. Vale, pues so we'll talk about vision, models, and cinema, and I will start by talking about vision and artificial intelligence. So from the beginning, vision was, or computer vision was at the root, at the origins of artificial intelligence. This is a great call for a summer project from MIT in the 60s, where they were asking for students to do a summer project to do computer vision. So they thought that they could solve the computer vision problem in a summer. So as you can see, techno-optimism is decades old. So this is from the artificial intelligence group at MIT. So in the 60s, or yeah, from 60s to the 80s, probably the leading approach in artificial intelligence was that of the symbolists, of making rules to tell the machines what to do, to emulate intelligence in that way, through rules. But also at the same time, artificial neural networks were born. So, well, first of all, I should have said that before. This talk, I've tried to make it as available to everybody as possible, so that you can follow it even if you don't have a technical background. So I've tried to, I think I succeeded in not putting not even one equation. So therefore, forgive me if some of you are very familiar with these concepts, and please, I hope you do not get bored. So the current success of AI is based on artificial neural networks. And as I was saying, this also dates from the late 50s or early 60s. And this is the first artificial neural network, the perceptron, which was made for image processing, okay, or for image classification. And it was based on a very simplified model of how biological neurons work, which came to be known as the standard model of vision. So in this model, a neuron receives information through its dendrites, does a linear filtering of that information, and then applies a nonlinearity to it, and then out goes that information to the next neuron. And, okay, so this is what I said. Standard model is just linear filtering followed by a nonlinear function. And this is the backbone, or the cornerstone, I should say, of artificial neural networks. The neuron element of neural networks is like this: linear filtering followed by nonlinearity to this day. But not also that. So this standard model remains as the foundation of most models of vision in vision neuroscience, also vision perception, and of course in eines. So in 1979, based on some neuroscience work from Nobel Prize winners Hubel and Wiesel in the early 60s, the neocognitron was proposed, in which, so this was the first neural network with more than one layer, which posed a theoretical problem in terms of mathematics. It was found that it was not possible to prove that you could train this. So formally prove mathematically that this sort of network could be trained. Then in 1988, something called the backpropagation algorithm was introduced. It was a mathematical method that allowed to train these sort of networks, which are called deep because they have more than one layer. And so that was 88, way before the success, the runaway success that we are currently still living of deep learning. And that happened in 2012. And it could happen then and not before, because it was at that time that the networks, or we humans had access to lots of data, which was needed in order to train these networks, and also computer power, which was also essential. We were able to move from a theoretical concept to a practical application. And, well, this gave birth, and, well, the first, shocking or magic success that happened in around that time was that a neural network, a deep neural network, was able to achieve almost human level of image classification. Okay, so we all know about these successes. The previous speaker talked about important limitations of neural networks, like bias, for instance. And there are some limitations for which there's a lot of work going on, and we can be moderately optimistic that solutions can be found. But there are also some critical limitations of deep learning for which there's a lot of research going on and no promising solutions yet. Dramatic pause. Sorry. So, for these critical limitations, really, people are not that optimistic. The first of them is adversarial attacks. So, neural networks are very sensitive to adversarial attacks, which are very small perturbations of the input that cause a complete change of the output of the network. So, for instance, here a network trained for classification correctly says that the first image is of bananas, but then the second image that has some noise that you and I cannot perceive but is there, for the network it makes the image be of a baseball or of a power drill or of a crocodile, okay? And this is fun, but it can be dangerous. So, for instance, there was one paper where they showed that if you put the stickers in this sign, you could make an autonomous car think that this is actually a speed limit of 45 miles per hour instead of a stop sign. Or you could tell a medical assessment system, say that this tumor is benign instead of malign. And you don't need images. So all these examples I'm using images for because it's more clear, but the same happens with text, okay? So you can change the text and the result of the network is completely different. Another critical limitation is that of generalization. So the network may work great if you run it on data that is similar to the one used to the data used to train the network. But if you run it on data which is somewhat different, then the performance usually decays a lot. So a network, for instance, that is very good on recognizing chairs, if you put the chair on top on a weird position under bad lighting, it would not be able to recognize that. And another critical limitation, the amount of training data. Networks need orders of magnitude more data to achieve same level of performance as a human, but orders of magnitude. And for a specific problem of image classification, if you want the network to have, on a very large image data set, the same a level of error which is comparable to that of a human, continuing the trend of how networks are growing and needing data, it turns out that if we want to go from the current, I think it's 10% to down to 5% error, this will be achieved in a couple of years, but it will require an amount of data that will consume for training an amount of electricity that is the same as the New York City consumes in a month, okay? And of course, this has associated a lot of, a huge environmental impact in terms not only of carbon footprint, but also water consumption and so on. So all these critical limitations can be seen as an inability of the neural networks to emulate vision. So it may seem that they are close to how the brain works in terms of vision. They were inspired by vision. They seem to do things like humans do. But in reality, they do things very differently from how humans do it. And in vision, it can be seen. So we humans are not subject to these adversarial attacks. For us, it's always bananas. We don't care where the chair is. We can recognize it pretty well. And we don't need, our brain consumes like 20 watts. So networks are not like vision. There's another problem. This is a bombshell paper that I keep promoting. It's not mine. I keep promoting it because I think everyone should be aware of this. It's one of a number of works by a team in the applied math department in Cambridge. And these guys very elegantly proved that there's a barrier with deep learning that cannot be broken, and these critical limitations cannot be surpassed if we keep with the same model of neural networks that we have now. So in this and following papers, they show that accurate neural networks inevitably become unstable, okay? And so they're not robust. So they are sensitive to adversarial attacks. And if you add more training data, still you cannot fix this. These instabilities are not rare events. And also, there's no remedy, what I said before, within this standard deep learning framework. So we are F star star CED, apparently. And proof of that, so that's a mathematical paper, and you could say, well, mathematicians, right? But I think this is supported by reality. So in reality, after plunging over $100 billion on self-driving cars, we still do not have self-driving cars. And big companies that invested a lot in this, they're getting rid of these enterprises. Also, this is, I thought it was very fun. This is from March this year. So Amazon had a supposedly, fully automatic checkout. Well, you just grab your things and go out to the supermarket, and they just bill you afterwards. Well, it turns out that it was not fully automatic. So the footage was sent to Asia, where underpaid people were looking at what you were buying and then charge you for it. And even though it was expensive, so they have to cancel out. And they did that because computer vision didn't work. And well, as I said, this is not only for video or images. So this is from May this year, so from last month. This study found that more than half of ChatGPT answers to programming questions are wrong, okay? And if you are a programmer, this tells you that you probably shouldn't use this because it takes you, they're wrong and they're written in such neat, clean text that makes you think, well, maybe I'm wrong because this looks great. What about generative AI in film and TV? This is a fantastic report from Variety, which is the main journal for the Hollywood industry. And it came out last week. And you should get it. It's fantastic. It's really great. And among other things, they say that there's something called the slot machine effect of text-to-image and video models. Superficially, AI images look good, but they tend to have a recognizable feel. Generative AI models aren't yet adequate to replace physical cameras, virtual production, or VFX on premium productions. Okay? And the two main limitations, as also were mentioned, this was mentioned by the previous speaker, are quality and controllability. So, okay, so a AI video often shows spontaneous artifacts like morphing or wrong anatomy. And this, more importantly, these problems may never be completely resolvable because AI models are trained on video, which is 2D projections from the 3D world. And there's nothing in those 2D videos that tells you about the physical laws of the 3D reality. And okay, so this paragraph, maybe I can read it quickly. So they say that more controllability is needed, which at present these tools do not offer enough to meet the extreme levels needed by Hollywood artists and directors. And repeatedly, visual and VFX artists and AI leaders alike confided to, well, this journal of Variety, the main challenge and pitfall of today's video generation models is unpredictability and lack of fine-grained control over what AI outputs in response to a prompt. For mainstream projects, it's likely more effective to shoot with a camera than make requests of a model that does not really understand the mechanics of the 3D world, okay? All right, so going to cinema. So a short limitation of digital cinema and film from the beginnings of film is that you have to adjust the image appearance to emulate perception. And this used to be done by picking stock and by adequate developing process and something called color timing. And this is mostly done now, or only done now, by software. Oh, sorry, thank you. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. It was happening before? Oh, okay.
Is it connected to the power?
It is not connected to the power, but I think I'm doing fine in terms of, yeah. I don't know.
Not your computer, something else's.
Ah, okay. I don't know. Alex. Vale, pues... Pues, ¿entonces qué hago?
Esta imagen da problemas.
Ah, es por... Dices esta imagen. Vale, pues si no me paso al ordenador que tenéis. Pues uso el ordenador que tenéis, entonces. ¿Sí? Y lo cambiamos. Sí. Esta imagen es pirata. Yeah. This was not acknowledged. So, sorry, we're going to do a switch of... No, it's not only that image, I guess. Yes, in the meantime. So, I was saying, so this color correction and this emulation of visual perception is done on software tools, but it's important to notice that it's done by skilled artists and film professionals, like we have some here, like Steph and Kike. So professional colorists that have lots of skill in and a golden eye and are able to manipulate these software tools in order to make the images have the intended look. So, yeah, the problem is that visual perception is not solved, and sorry, I cannot go on like this. I really need a replacement computer. I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah, already.
Yeah, I'm back. Well, welcome back. Thanks. I'm very sorry for this. So anyway, the cinema industry, as everyone else, is grounded in vision models that are limited. And this is a problem of limitations in vision science. And this is why we have, as I said, skilled artists doing the color correction. And this is a famous cinematographer, and this is a fantastic quote that I always put in my presentations, is that the color grading tools in their current state are simply too clunky. The underlying math that the software uses to transform the image is too primitive and simple.
Say next. Say next.
Next. Okay. All right. Okay, so over the years in my group, we've developed some vision-based tools for cinema. So for instance, for the problem of film grain emulation, what is this problem? Images look better if they have film grain. People, including most of us, prefer images with some amount of grain. And since everything is shot digitally, almost now, everything has film grain emulation put on top of it. So all these TV series that we see, they have film grain emulation. And so we did this method, we published a few years back, in which we emulated the noise that happens in the retina. So we use vision modeling of the noise in the retina to be able to add texture to films that is similar to film grain, but it's more flexible. You can manipulate it better for artistic purposes. And well, here are several examples. So you have more control of the type of grain that you generate. And it allows you to encode to encode video with less bitrate. It allows you to compress more, which is great because saving bitrate is good for the planet. So this is a fantastic paper from 2019. They estimated the environmental impact of streaming video, and it's atrocious. It's like 1% of global emissions. It's really terrible. So anything we can do to reduce the impact is useful. The style transfer problem so we have this paper from last year. The style transfer problem consists in being able to transfer the look of your reference image to some other image. So in this case, we have the image on the top, and we want the image on the bottom to look as the image on the top. So what we do in this method is also emulating vision. We take certain statistics from the reference image, and we transfer them to the image that we want to modify. And so here are a few examples. So on the left column, the images we want to modify. On the middle column, the references. And on the right-hand side, the result. Okay. Video quality metrics. So what is this? These are automatic methods that tells you how an observer will say that an image, how good an observer would say an image is. So these are automatic methods that if you show them a video or an image, it will tell you, well, a regular observer would say that this image looks great, or it's so-so, or it's crap, don't send that. So we have this paper we've submitted recently, in which what we do is we propose a new type of video quality metric for 8K video. So again, the idea here is that you have an original video and you have compressed versions, and you want to estimate how an observer would say the comparison will look like. And what happens is that for video quality metrics, most of them, or the most successful, they compare frame by frame, and then they do some average. And this temporal average is usually very simple. It's just a mean average. And if you do that, this works great for 2K video, not so good for 4K, and for 8K, the results are very bad. So these numbers there, the closer to 1, the more they resemble human observers. So you can see that for 2K, they're around 0.8. For 8K, are around 0.2, 0.1. So we propose different method of doing temporal pooling, again, based on vision modeling. And we are able to make the results go up by a substantial percentage. Okay, so then I left to the end these two other applications, tone and gamut mapping, for a reason that will allow me to connect this with AI. So the connection is coming. So what is tone mapping? This is a procedure that needs to be done because the contrast registered by a camera is much larger than the contrast that a display can reproduce. So you have to reduce it without making the image look bad. So that process is called tone mapping. And, cameras do this automatically, and the results are okay, but usually not professionally good. So this is the result produced by a camera with the standard output. And if you instead take the raw footage and have a colorist correct this is what the result you get. So the background is no longer overexposed. Okay, and this is, again, done by software, but by a human. And the gamut mapping problem is that different display technologies are able to reproduce different ranges of color. So the colors on your TV, the reds are not as saturated as the reds you can see in a top-of-the-line laser cinema projector, for instance. So you have to adapt your content to the display in terms of color. And if you do that in a very simple way, so for instance, you want to reduce the colors here, if you use the most simple method, this is what you get, clipping artifacts. So how it's done professionally is people painstakingly create three-dimensional lookup tables, also done by artists. And this used to be in-house, like secret sauce kind of things. Okay, so we have several works on both topics, and the latest ones that we did were this one on gamut mapping and this one on tone mapping. And we propose methods that do this tone mapping problem and gamut mapping problem automatically. And for doing these methods, we had, so they were inspired by, or motivated by vision phenomena. So we follow the efficient representation principle from vision science that involves the emulation of adaptation and histogram equalization. And we also emulated key aspects of visual perception and visual neuroscience. And also the parameters, and we had a lot of help from film professionals that allowed us to fine-tune our models. And the results, so maybe this is not going to be shocking. You are not saying, oh, but this is helpful. So this is an example of gamut extension. We go from here to here, and the difference is not shocking, but in terms of the color chart, it's much closer to the actual color chart, plus the skin tones are preserved. And this is something which is really very important. Oh, okay, great, thank you. So for tone mapping, again, this is the manual grading by a colorist, and this is the result we obtain, which are not the same, but are similar. This is the output of a professional cinema camera, and this is our result. So there's no color cast. We don't have color problems. This is, again, output of the camera, our result. Output of the camera, our result. This is the output of the AI color correction tool from Adobe Premiere. This is obtained just this last week. This is our result. So you can see that, okay, you may prefer more saturated colors, but in terms of doing things with the image, this is better. Plus the windshield is not overexposed as here. Okay. Another example, this is the AI color correction from Premiere. This is our result. So the important thing here is that we don't have artifacts like here, for instance, and here. Right? And here also, you can see this is the AI result, color artifacts here, here in the boundaries, and this is our result. Anyway, so these methods on tone and gambit mapping, they are different, but they have the same underlying mathematical equation, which does not follow the linear-nonlinear paradigm of the standard model. Can you raise the lights, please? I would fall asleep otherwise. I mean, if I were you, so I wouldn't want that. So again, both methods have the same underlying mathematical equation, and it does not follow the paradigm of the standard model, which I mentioned at the beginning, linear filtering, nonlinear activation function. And so we studied that in this article in Scientific Reports, and we found out that this equation would be equivalent to having a neuron which, instead of the linear, nonlinear scheme of the standard model, shown on the left, would have a behavior that, like shown on the right. What's the difference there? It's two main differences. One is that the dendrites no longer just receive the information, they also process the information non-linearly. Okay, that's one difference. So they are active, not passive dendrites. And the other difference is that the information flows back from the soma to the dendrites, affecting these nonlinearities. Okay, it's not longer one direction of the nerve signal, it's going back and forth. And these two phenomena actually happen in reality, in biological neurons. So you have dendritic integration, which is nonlinear, which is affected by information coming from the soma, called backpropagation action potentials. You have then in the same neuron different dendrites depending on the position on the neuron, and these different dendrites have different nonlinear properties. And it's also been shown that dendrites have a very important role in modulating perception. So what is our approach now? Our approach is to take this new equation, which again, I have not written out of respect for everyone's time. And we use this equation to replace the standard model in 3 lines: in visual perception models, in neuroscience models, and in neural networks. So some results. In visual perception, for instance, with this approach, we have been able to explain a visual phenomena called plate masking, which is that this is from perception science. The minimum contrast we need to detect that there are two signs there instead of one depends on the orientation in a way that cannot, this is an important thing, these results in psychophysical experiments cannot be predicted with the standard model. So this was found out in 1989, and until now it was not be able to reproduce this with the standard model without making some ad hoc model for this data. And we have been able to solve this. Also, for motion perception, we have been able, using this, again, this equation, based on a more realistic neuron, we have been able to create a motion sensor that is able to detect different types of motion, first order and second order motion, which again, this is was an open problem in vision science. For video quality metrics, based on, again, on this new equation, we have been able to create a video quality metric that obtains very good results for high frame rate video. Better results than VMAF, which is the metric that Netflix uses to automatically decide the quality of the video it sends us. So we are happy about that, of course. And in neuroscience, I will not go into detail about that, but again, we have, using this equation, we have been able to explain a number of phenomena which are challenging for this standard model. But, And now, cutting to the chase, some results on neural networks. So these results, this new type of network, which we call INRF nets for INRF, which is the name we're given to this type of more biologically resembling neural summation process. So they are more expressive. They can reproduce functions without as many neurons as a regular neural network. And again, this is probably really too mathematic, but it has been proven that with a standard neural network, there's a thing that you cannot do, and you can do it with this. So that's the bottom line. Also, they're more expressive because the boundaries of the regions you can use these networks to make classifications to, they can be more complicated than with the standard ANNs. And now for something more tangible, these new type of networks, they generalize better. They produce sometimes substantial improvement in reducing error. They're more robust. They resist much more adversarial attacks, and we have very recent formal mathematical proof of this. And very importantly, they need much less training data in order to achieve the same accuracy. So for instance here, yes, so the CNN is in blue. To achieve this performance with 100% of the data of the CNN, we just need, like this, 70% maybe of the data with this new type of network. Okay, so I'm ending now. So the colossal success of artificial neural networks is the main driver of the meteoric rise of artificial intelligence of the past few years. But ANNs suffer from critical problems which can be seen as failures to emulate basic human vision abilities. In cinema post-production, the adjustments aiming for natural image appearance are manually performed by cinema professionals who complain that vision models and tools are too primitive and simple. And remarkably, with their manual techniques, these artists and technicians are able to achieve what state-of-the-art vision models cannot. So novel vision design approaches developed with cinema applications in mind suggest a new framework for creating ANNs whose behavior is more similar to that of a human observer, overcoming their most important limitations. And our current work is the following. We are designing new components for ANNs using very recent results and techniques from vision science, mostly visual neuroscience, but also visual perception, that go beyond the standard model. We want to optimize these components using as training data key experimental results from visual psychophysics and validate and fine-tune the new neural networks for core problems in computer vision. And I thank you, and also the financial support of these fine institutions. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Marcelo, for this nice and inspiring talk. Now we have time for 2 questions. Yeah. Otherwise, we will continue.
Thanks for a great talk. You mentioned before that the models don't include the physics of the space because they are based on 2D images and so on. Could that be solved in the future, maybe, with 3D imaging, maybe?
Maybe, yes. Okay. Yes, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, I doubt it. Just one comment there. There are people who argue that you cannot, there's also a barrier you cannot break with deep learning unless you introduce causality. Okay, so that's something that, of course, goes hand in hand with physical modeling. So yeah.
I just wanted to confirm, I mean, we kind of infer it, but all the examples of your research are done, I suppose, with neural networks, and even, if there's not symbolic methods, that's what I mean. And if that's the case, which seems to be, what is usually the training data that you use? Because I'm just thinking, for instance, in the case of color grading, if you use as a reference examples chosen perhaps by professionals from Hollywood, wouldn't that also be, in this case, I relate to the previous talk, some kind of giving more preference to a specific taste of these professionals, and how much that represents really the taste of humanity in a way?
Yes, thank you. So no, we do not use, for these examples, we have not used neural networks. So they have been generated using vision models, which do not take the form of artificial neural networks. It's just that we realized that with these vision models, we could create a new type of neural network that has a number of improvements. And this new type of neural network we have used for the results that I showed at the end, which are not for these images, are these results on, modeling neuroscience results in experiments and so on. So, does this answer your question? I mean, so the tone mapping and gamut mapping and style transfer, all those results with images that I showed, professional images, we generated with our models, which are not implemented as neural networks. But they're not symbolic either. So maybe it's a terminology thing here, but what they are is equations. So there are equations with a number of mathematical operations and terms and parameters, and you put an image on one end, and it outputs an image on the other end. Okay. Sorry, we don't need training data. Yes, but it does have parameters which, as I mentioned, were fine-tuned by having the input from professional colorists, which maybe I should have said this. Tone mapping and gamut mapping, or let's talk about tone mapping. This is a type of color correction you do at the beginning. It's like a technical grading that you do before putting any artistic intent there. So you just want this to make the image look natural. No matter how crazy your vision is afterwards, you have to start with something that looks natural. And this is what we emulate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that we have a lot of more questions. I have, but I will keep them for the break or lunchtime or whatever. Sure. And let's do a break, a 15 minutes break, more or less, and we will come back with the next speaker. Thank you.
Gracias.
And is influential in the areas of crisis informatics, content quality and credibility, and adversarial web search, to mention some of them. Carlos is very highly cited researchers and has co-authored many papers, more than 100. And let's give Carlos the floor and start. Go ahead.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks. Your invitation is one of the most challenging I have received in recent times to talk about something. So I asked generative AI to generate an image of a cat in the shape of a professor, and this cat reads a book and thinks he is a professor, and that's more or less me. Like, this is going to be my avatar for the rest of the talk. Filmmaking is not my expertise, and the talk is not about movies made with AI, but about AI in movies. And I study applications of computing to social issues in general, right? And algorithmic fairness in particular. Now, I'm an old dude person. I've been around I got my PhD in 2004, and I lived long enough to see 7 moral panics. Actually, I have lived through 8. There was one on violence in video games in the late 70s. I was already alive, but I didn't get to see that. So 7, 8 moral panics, online pornography in the late 80s. Then you remember, like, in the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. Maybe the older among you remember this cartoon from the New York Times that about author identity. Then Napster, some of you maybe. Napster was another moral panic. Blockchain, somebody please think about the children. And generative AIs now. So I've lived through a lot of moral panics. I have to say that in my experience, the war doesn't end. Moral panics are usually exploited by interest groups, and they never go fully away. They resurface with other names. And they are usually exploited by interest groups, but I already said that. And to my take, and I'm really pro-regulation in general, in particular of technology, is that moral panics are pre-legislative periods. So when you next time you spot a moral panic and you see 47 years, you have 7 or 8. So next time you spot a moral panic, think, okay, what's the legislation this is advancing? So what's happening here, right? And I'm pro-regulation. I don't think industry should be self-regulated, particularly not computer science, which is my industry. So this talk is about. I want to tell you something that I learned in my previous work. I was working in humanitarian computing for many years for United Nations OCHA, a little bit for the Red Cross and for other organizations that do emergency response. Because I was born in Chile, so I'm very used to emergencies. We have a big earthquake every year, more or less, in Chile. And there was this really interesting thing about real life versus real life. So one of these 2 images is real, it's from an actual disaster. The other one is not. And I think you can easily kind of spot which one, right? It's not. This is a little bit harder. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand and tell me which of the 3 is real. With 1 finger, 2 fingers, or 3, right? 1, 2, 3. Like, please raise your hand and tell me which one do you think is real, is from a real disaster. 1, 2, or 3. All right. Interesting. Yeah, thank you very much. So it turns out that emergency management as a discipline emerged post-World War II to give the military something to do. And part of the way in which emergency management was created was in this like command and control kind of fashion. The command and control approach to emergencies. And the command and control approach to emergencies assumes that every time there is an emergency, people will run in circles and panic and riot and loot. And that's not what actually happens. So here, the real image is the left one. This is real. And this was heavily criticized in social media because these people are doing exactly what they tell you, like repeatedly not to do, to take your luggage with you when you exit the plane, right? So as you see, like a real emergency is not particularly cinematic. And I think real issues of AI are not particularly cinematic, and they are not portrayed very commonly in movies and TV series, right? Command and control. There is this beautiful book called A Paradise Built in Hell, where they reproduce the experience. They interview people who have gone through emergencies, and they all tell you how wonderful their neighbors are, how surprised they were to discover that they lived in such a supportive community, which is something that resonates a lot with me because I have gone through many earthquakes in different places, and earthquake catches you anywhere. And you realize that people in emergencies don't run in circles. They usually kind of are the first people to respond to the emergency. They do many things that movies don't portray. So, and I think to a large extent, our imaginary about AI is shaped by very confusing narratives from movies, series, and also newspapers, of course. So, the most prevalent narrative, I would say, in movies that are about AI or that speak about AI is this idea that humans lose control over their creation. And this is not a particularly new topic for movies. This is like the usual kind of Frankenstein kind of scenario where you have creation of a human that escapes human control, usually trying to kill its creator. That's I would say, number one scenario. But there are a couple of others that we also see in movies, right? So is this loss of human control, then questioning what it means to be human and to what extent we have this capacity for self-determination. And the third scenario is somehow replacing human connection and human affection even, right? So with respect to the first kind of scenario that is usually portrayed in movies, you have, next time you watch a movie about an entity, an artificial entity that transcends the capabilities of humans, for instance, that transcends a physical body or that has like godlike capabilities, it usually, and if it involves technology, it usually comes either through the Terminator side or the Robocop side. So the Terminator side of things is that you build a machine, and then or also the Pinocchio kind of side, right? So you build a machine and you kind of give this machine intelligence to the point that this machine is so intelligent that it has like superhuman qualities because it has the intelligence of a human or more, and also like the physical strength of a machine. And that's one way through transcendence, and this is the machine side, and there are many. Metropolis, also Terminator, Westworld, like AI. There are many movies that are about from this side. And the other one is, the other kind of road through transcendence that is portrayed in movies is where you take a human and you enhance these humans with machine-like capabilities. And that's more like the Robocop side, or even Lucy, to give a more recent example. So it's a human, with the help of some technology, chemicals, like biomechanics, or etc., you convert this human into a kind of an entity that transcends human capabilities, and of course that provokes fear and an emotional response, and is great material for a movie. So the other scenario is where AI makes us doubt about ourselves and what we are. I think there is a very interesting scene in the TV series Loki, where Loki is undergoing a Kafkian process, right? So his process, he has no idea why is his process, how is the process, and he goes through this bureaucracy. That is like it's a very transcendent bureaucracy, and Loki is being processed through this bureaucratic process, and part of this is that he has to cross a portal. Before crossing the portal, he is asked, okay, are you completely sure? Please confirm that you are an organic creature and do in fact possess what many cultures will call a soul. And Loki asks, okay, he's ready to cross the portal, and then he asks, but what if I'm not? And then the bureaucrat tells him, well, the machine will melt you from inside out, so please move along. And of course, Loki is very hesitant. I think I would be a little bit hesitant. I have no evidence, right, that they're not a machine. So, and the third scenario is this, like we have seen perhaps it more recently, especially in the latest demonstrations of GPT-4, where you have like a large language model connected to a very good voice synthesizer with some emotional inflection, and you can have this friend, in this case, like sounds like a woman for reasons that are very sexist and has to have to do with the history of how we conceive virtual assistants in computer science. That this she laughs at the jokes of the person who is doing this. She tells, okay, that's so sweet of you. And of course, there are tons of people that don't have anyone in their lives that tells them how sweet they are. The polyamorous among you have many, but for a lot of people, they have zero. And these artifacts can have really like dramatic effects over the well-being of a person. And there is this author, Sherry Turkle. She has been writing for decades about affective computing. So she writes about toys for children and toys for seniors that have some affective components that induce love. These are machines that their basic affordance is that you can take care of them. And these machines actually provide a level of connection that for someone who doesn't have a connection is really better than nothing, and absolutely better than nothing. For a senior in a residence, these machines can be transformative. They provide you like the experience of caring for a pet without harming anyone. But at the same time, they take us in what is a real slippery slope, which is the idea that if you have no connection, then any connection is good, or particularly a connection with the technology, to the point where, well, actually technology-mediated connections or technology-enhanced connection, or even connections with technology, are better than human connections. And I'm sure that this, having a friend who laughs about all of your jokes, who tells you you're sweet all the time, can be very, very addictive, and perhaps much better than the friends that we have now for at least temporarily. So let me tell you about real harms, and real versus real. So machines in AIs in movies, they typically kill people or harm people or make them fall in love. But machines in real life, they do other things that are much less cinematic, but actually much more consequential. Right? So the next time you apply for a job online and you submit your CV through some interface for a job application, remember that corporate job position that used to attract, say, 150 applicants 10 years ago, currently attracting the order of 250 or 300 applicants per job application. So your CV is not going to be read by a human, unfortunately. Your CV is going to be seen first by a machine. And you can tell this when next time you get a rejection notice at 6 a.m. in the morning on a Monday, you will know that that was not a very dedicated human resource professional who told you that you have not been selected for that job. It was a machine who pre-filtered your CV. That's a real harm, not particularly cinematic, but real. Other things include flag you as a high risk for a loan, determine that perhaps you have received a government benefit, but you're abusing it, as the Dutch government actually fell because of this issue like a couple of years ago. And they have had many situations like this where you have a machine system that triggers a re-examination of a public benefit for an individual, and this re-examination, of course, is concentrated on particularly vulnerable populations. My field is algorithmic fairness, and one of the first things that you learn in algorithmic fairness is that basically every application of artificial intelligence have been found to have discriminatory biases. Once again, almost every application of artificial intelligence have been found to have discriminatory biases. Of course, we're talking about applications where the items that are being processed correspond to people, right? But even in the ones that are not like this, sometimes it happens. So the typical are face recognition. We saw some examples like health risk assessments, candidate selection for a job. I mentioned it already, right? Another kind of typical lesson from algorithmic fairness is that machines can discriminate. Actually, one definition of something that Casper Lippert Rasmussen, a philosopher, calls statistical group discrimination is where you have a disadvantageous differential treatment towards a socially salient group on the grounds of some statistical belief. And statistical beliefs is all what AIs are, like particularly machine learning systems. They develop statistical beliefs. That means they extract the statistics from the training data, and then they act on these statistics. So and if that produces a disadvantageous differential treatment, then the machine is discriminating. So machines can discriminate. This is what I'm trying to say. Machines can discriminate. They do it very efficiently also. Right? And machines can discriminate, and in fact, in many cases, or most cases, AIs that you develop have this discrimination. Now, these AIs are also typically embedded in a context in which they are built for a particular purpose. And there is Virginia Eubanks has done some research on this, and what she finds is that there are many cases in which AIs or machine learning systems are deployed in what she calls low-right settings. And low-right settings are situations in which your power to exercise your rights has been diminished. So for instance, if you're applying for a job and you get an unfair notification at 6 a.m. that your application has been denied, you are really focused on getting a job. You're not trying to pick a fight with a corporation while being unemployed, right? You are looking to get a job. The same if you're crossing a border, if you are applying for parole, if you are in prison, if you are applying for refugee status, and so on. Right? So these are kind of what's called like low right settings, and typically AIs are deployed first in low right settings. But remember, everything that you let the government do to others, eventually your government will do to you. So low right settings are just testing grounds. Okay. The other point is this idea of what Ruman Shudhuri, she used to be at Twitter, calls moral outsourcing. And by moral outsourcing, she doesn't mean to send, what she means specifically is when you have a dirty job, you give this dirty job to a machine. So for instance, you want to reduce expenditure in a particular programs of benefits. You know that even people who qualify for this government benefit will fail to, for instance, show up or to bring the appropriate papers if you re-examine their case. So you make a contract with a technology company, and the technology company has to build you a system that detects people who are at risk of abusing this benefit. And here is the catch. You don't tell the company, find me people who are at risk. You tell the company, find me 300 people that I want to re-examine. Those 300 people may have a level of risk that maybe is not so high of being abusing the government benefit. But you have told this technology company, find me 300 people to re-examine, because I know some of them are going to fail the re-examination, maybe even if they are eligible for this benefit. And what that means is that essentially what you have taken is an unpopular decision, which is to reduce social expenditure, and you have outsourced this unpopular decision to a technology company that's going to build an algorithm that supposedly is very kind of clean and everything and does not discriminate and so on. So this is moral outsourcing. So be worried, like I tell my students of data science, be worried if you are getting involved into a moral outsourcing exercise, right? Because it can happen. So let me tell you a little bit about decision support and bureaucracies, and then I'm going to try to wrap up. So first, there are many situations in which AI are being deployed in decision support systems for social services. I'm citing 3 cases because these are 3 cases in which I have been involved in developing what is called an algorithmic audit. An algorithmic audit is like a financial audit. So you take something, you open it up, and you look inside and to see that everything is correct. Right? And in an algorithmic audit, you check algorithms for accuracy and discrimination and so on. And I have been involved in 3 cases. One is prediction of homelessness. There is a county in the US, it's called Allegheny County, where they have been deploying an algorithm that predicts who is among the people who are involved in social services, who is at risk of becoming homeless in the next years. Then we also did an audit of an algorithm for child neglect that determines if a child is at risk of being neglected by their family. And I'm very involved in Catalonia's recidivism risk prediction system, RISCAMBI, that predicts if a person is going to commit a new crime or a violent crime in the next 3 to 5 years. Now, in all of these cases, I'm going to notice a few things. So first is that none of these systems is perfect. These numbers, this is in a range from 0 to 1, 1 meaning perfect, 0.5 meaning random. And this reflects like mediocre predictive characteristics, right? Or let's not call it mediocre because mediocre represents like a less effort. I would say imperfect prediction qualities. And what's interesting is that these algorithms achieve more or less the same accuracy that you can get with a team of trained humans. So if you take a bunch of social workers and educators, psychologists, etc., and you ask them to examine very carefully the case of a person and determine if they believe that that person is going to commit a new crime between 3 and 5 years, they achieve this level of precision. And if you ask the best machine learning algorithms that we have, and actually they don't need to be that good, you get around the same precision, right? So you have imperfect human teams being supported by imperfect machines. So that's the scenario. And this is the scenario in which all decision support in the public sector operates, right? In this kind of rectangle where they have like an imperfect accuracy for both human teams and machines, and also like the systems are not completely automatic, but they are all not completely human. They are kind of in the middle. They are human teams with decision support systems. And I'm saying this because then the humans have to navigate, and we saw this morning this very vivid imagery about like positive and negative heuristics with regard to technology, which we call automation bias and algorithmic aversion. Right? So these bureaucrats have to use decision support system, and we do the same in our lives. When you turn on Google Maps, you're doing the same. You're looking at the Google Maps a little bit critically and thinking, well, I'm not going to ignore this thing, because if I ignore it, maybe I'm going to take an hour more to get there, but I'm not going to follow it blindly either. Right? So you navigate this narrow path between these two things, and this is the same that we have to design systems that allow people to, or that's my challenge, to design systems that help people navigate this narrow path between completely ignoring and completely being blinded by the algorithm. And like one of the most interesting cases that we do here, that we study here in Catalonia, is RISCANBI. RISCANBI is a recidivism risk prediction tool that has been used by Catalan prisons since 2009. At any given time, there are about 30,000 inmates in Catalan prisons, and most of them undergo a RISCANBI evaluation every 6 months. And this tool, which is very simple, like a logistic regression, trained on like about 1,000 inmates from prison with their outcomes, they have like a number of things that you determine about the person who is in prison, and based on those factors, you put this prisoner in like low, medium, or high risk. And if you are medium or high risk, the chances that you will get parole are very low. Normally, you get parole if you have low risk. Also, you get permits, you get third degree, you get like some benefits from being low risk. Now, here there is an interesting take on this, which I think is very vivid, because there are kind of two schools of thought here. So one is that you cannot use static factors. So if that person has poor childhood adjustment, but is now 47, let's say, then the fact that this person had poor childhood adjustment should not have any influence on the decision on what's the risk level of this person today. But there is another school of thought that says, well, if other things equal, choose size were a useful predictor of recidivism, then we should include it as a predictor, right? Because it's a statistical, if choose size is statistically related to the risk of committing a crime reliably, why not using it as a predictor, right? So you see the contention here. There are things that you can use, you should use, or like, there is a very interesting question here. Okay, so what we did with for the Department of Justice lately is to compare what happens if they don't have any decision tool and they have like a decision tool. And I'm going to tell you like the result is that actually people are better with the decision support tool than without it. They are better. Actually, if you take someone from the street and you ask them to take a case of a person and tell you if that person is going to commit a new crime, they come up with a very kind of random prediction. And with some help, machine help, you can get them to be as good as experts without any tool. But if you give the experts a tool, then you can make them actually perform better. And here is like the thing I have been fighting about for the past couple of years is nagging feeling that I don't know if I'm doing good or if I'm doing harm by helping analyze these systems, because they do make people better at predictions, but they also introduce some unfairnesses. So, for instance, this system has been designed for the majority of the prison population. 90% of the prison population in Catalonia are men, 10% are women. And for women, the system doesn't work so well. The predictive accuracy it has is not very good. Despite our attempts of telling the Department of Justice that they should improve this system and retrain, they have been really dragging their feet on this. But it's really, at the same time, this tool is a useful tool, right? So that's complicated. Okay, let me try to jump to the last version, and this is a little bit more light. But I think it has an interesting message. So stay with me for a moment more, and I will tell you what's the interesting message. So this is a game. We ask people to play this game. In this game, you're supposed to drill for oil, right? So you click in with your mouse, it's like the Minesweeper, but this is an easier version. So you click with the mouse, and this yields like some units of oil. This yields a little less or a little more, and then we tell the user, okay, here is the suggestion of a machine of where to drill for oil, and the objective of the user is to get as many points as they can by clicking on the map. Is it clear? Right. So This is the real interface. We have the map. We tell people, okay, this is your score, and this is powered by AI. These are recommendations that are powered by AI, and we recommend the people this cell. And we do this over and over, and actually we pay people for how many points they get, like in short. So what's interesting is that we provide 3 levels. So first thing is that actually having some AI actually helps people. The same way that it helps predict recidivism, it helps people increase their score. So the black thing is up, is superior to the gray, so that means that the scores are higher. But interestingly, we also have produced 3 versions of our decision support. A very good one that actually tells you where there is oil, a mediocre one, and a really poor one that basically tells you like a random point in the map, right? And what people do is that if you give them very bad assistant, they tend to click farther and farther from the thing that you point. This is the distance to the recommendation. If you give them very poor assistant, if you give them a random recommendation, at the beginning they believe it, but then when they see that they can do better than the machine, they actually start clicking very far from the recommendation. If you give them very good recommendations, then at the beginning they start clicking more or less near it, but over time they learn to rely on the recommendation that you're giving them, and they click near the recommendation. But here is the kicker. If after you see humans are behaving rationally, they are following the advice of a high accuracy system, and they are ignoring the advice of a low accuracy system. But then in an exit interview, you tell them, how good do you think the system that you used was? And we ask them many questions about this, and we compute like an aggregate score. And it turns out that people believe that the low accuracy system that was essentially random is a little bit worse than the high accuracy system that actually yields a very good score, right? So people behave rationally. They follow the advice of a good machine, and they ignore the advice of a bad machine. But then when you ask them how good the systems are, they don't perceive it at a conscious level. They do it unconsciously, right? That means that you can sell them anything. You can sell people anything. You put AI on it, you sell it. We can sell this. You see, people don't realize it's much worse than the good system. We can sell people air, and they will buy it, right? Because at a conscious level, they don't realize how bad the system that they are using is, right? So this actually comes from a book written in 1977 called Systematics, where there is one of the interesting maxims that John Gall writes is that in complex system, malfunction and even total non-function may be not detected for long periods, if ever. Right? So this is what's happening. Right? People don't realize that the system is not performing. So 2 more slides. Conclusions. First is that we have today AI-enabled bureaucracies processing minorities and processing people in low-rise settings, and those AI bureaucracies are imperfect. Second, that we have many systems for AI-enabled decision support, and they need to be closely monitored because they have problems of fairness, accuracy, and so on. Okay? Right. So I told you about movies made about AI, and I have my own ideas, so I'm going to throw them as Professor Kat. So ideas for movies about AI. So the first idea is that you take a bunch of text and you train an AI on this text, and the AI develops its own theories about gender. But actually, this has already happened, so there is no movie to be created. This is how text-based, if you translate from English to Spanish, the doctor and the nurse, it will tell you that the doctor is el doctor, is a male, the nurse is a woman, la enfermera, right? So machines have already developed their theories on gender, so that's not a movie to be made. The second is 2 AI becomes codependent on each other. So they learn that they need the output from the other AI to process. They realize that the optimal way is to have the output from the other AI. So they refuse to work if the other AI is not present. They are codependent. This can happen. Third, that everybody thinks that their profession is so creative that they are never going to be thrown out of business. That's what I believe about my own profession. But imagine you can create a short film on the spot for a person, really personalized, based on their brain waves and how they are reacting to things. And you can give them exactly what they need to suit themselves at the end of the day. Do you think you're still going to have a job after that if somebody creates that machine? Third, of course, this is great material for a movie. An AI-powered bureaucracy becomes sentient, but I think the best one is the last one. You have an AI-powered bureaucracy that accidentally is replaced by a random number generator, and nobody notices for years. Absolutely can happen. Thank you very much. Those are my collaborators.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for this excellent and interesting talk. Some questions? Yep.
So thank you for your talk. This thing about a machine is better than any human connection because I don't have any. I think it's very cultural. I mean, at least I see the emphasis Japan makes to robotics, robot companions. And maybe it has some religious basis, not only cultural basis, that actually people save to have a robot in the future when they reach old age, all right? So I don't know if it's very cultural or what, right? Most Westerners save for a pension for have a very enjoyable time with somebody you want to travel with, and you're not going to take a pet robot traveling. So it's very cultural. So I don't know whether you want to say something about it.
Yeah, so these are like the case study that Sherry Turkle touches in her book are like seals. They are seals, like a seal, like a foca. They have a little tail that they wiggle, and they have like big eyes, and you pet them, and it's cool. I mean, it's definitely something I would like to have if I don't have anything. Yeah, I'm all for pet seals.
But why we feel it's a fake? Right? No, I also was involved with this, with the parrot robot, etc. Right? And I felt like I need to be losing it, all right? I need to be losing contact with reality or having my mental capacities significantly diminished, that I'm going to have an intelligent conversation with a robotic seal, right? So I need to be at the level of seal 2 in my brain cell functionality.
Yeah. So that was like with all generation toys, right? But imagine like a generation, like a toy equipped with a good voice synthesizer, a good LLM, superior to the ones that we have today. Like wait like 5 years, don't retire yet.
That's the thesis of the movie Her, no? That's the thesis of the movie Her.
Yeah. That I think that's evidently becoming a reality, and we will collide against that reality. Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, and thank you for this funny presentation with really good insights. We were have listening all morning about the bias and how we have to take care when we are using these tools about the bias. But what about the solution? How we make it to solve the solution? For example, this February and March, it was a nice and interesting exhibition here in the CCCB that talked about AI. And it was interesting how artists are trying to solve this bias, introducing by themselves photos to create something new, but they are the first one to use AI to introduce more image. So how we can make it to solve the bias in jobs, in discrimination on gender, or in all these kind of social issues that you are also mentioning here.
Right. So, there is a whole field of algorithmic fairness that looks for both detecting and mitigating biases in AI systems. They typically mitigate biases by either changing the input, like these artists, like you change the input, you can manipulate the algorithm, or you can take the output and kind of post-process the output so that it is free from some biases. Now, I think the basic lesson there is that the bias needs to be monitored. And that kind of goes against many things that we do. Right? So for instance, if you go to a bank and you ask them, okay, what's your rejection rate of loan applicants by dark-skinned people? The bank will tell you, we don't know because we cannot ask people if their skin is light or dark. right? So if you don't have the data, you cannot detect this bias. And indeed, one of the foundational lessons of algorithmic fairness was that you need to know the protected attribute of the of the people that you're processing. You need to know the protected attributes of those people to detect and mitigate biases. So I think we're going, and the AI Act, fortunately, the AI Act introduces an exception to the GDPR where they allow you to capture protected attributes such as skin color, gender, and so on, for the purpose of detecting biases, because without you cannot do it. So I think the first step is awareness. Like fairness through unawareness, it's not possible. The system needs to be aware of the different protected groups, so to detect and mitigate those biases. So that's it, basically. It's okay to. We can continue. Sorry. Yeah. Or because you wanted short talk, right?
Let's thank the speaker again.
Thank you.
Bé, gràcies per continuar estant aquí en aquesta última fase del Rainsight, no? Amb, de moment, 4 ponències fabuloses que conclourem amb la Rachel Falconer. Thank you for being here. She told me not to read a lot about what she has been doing in the last 20 years, not to make it too long. But I will explain how I met Rachel, because it was in Madrid, am I right? Close to the Puerta de Alcalá in the Colección Solo. She talked about something wonderful, which was fragmented creation or something like that, thousands of people creating the same content or collaborating. Fascinating approach. And I mentioned this, how we met, because Colección Solo will be present too, thanks to this meeting in the Plaza Rainfield Festival. So don't forget about what's going to happen tomorrow here, because we're going to have among us Hugging Face, Stability again, Crea, obviously Carme Puche, Sergio Álvarez Napagao, Claudio Celis Bueno, who is here, and a lot of wonderful speakers. So I recommend you to also enroll the Rain Nova, which is going to be a huge section, and afterwards the second fest tomorrow in the afternoon. Who is Rachel Falconer? Before you start your presentation, she's a digital art curator, researcher, writer, lecturer in digital arts computing and creative computing, operating at the critical intersections of contemporary art practice, feminist technoscience, emerging technologies, civic data, infrastructures, and networked culture. She's the head of Digital Arts Computing BSc at the Goldsmith University of London, which I didn't mention. I have more stuff here which I won't read because you suggested. And she's regularly invited to speak at public events and has participated in public programs at institutions including Tate, Barbican, ACI, the Photographers Gallery, FACT, Royal College of Art, and probably now she can include the Rainfield Festival in the list, which we will obviously appreciate. Her research and writing has been published across a wide range of platforms, including The Guardian, the British Journal of Photography, and the Wide Review, among others. She's going to present intra-narrative contingencies. Interesting? Yeah, probably. I will stay here just transmuted world building and expanding attitudes to AI and authorship. Rachel Falconer, thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you so much for a very comprehensive introduction. I was going to start with that, but suffice to say this talk is kind of located around my creative practice, which is I'm a digital art curator and writer and researcher, And I'm really interested to sort of introduce this idea that a number of the speakers have been talking about this morning loosely around authorship. So creative practitioners and artists have been working, excellent. So we're going to pull focus on this kind of contingent nature of human and non-human collaborative narrative strategies, structures and outputs as they have placed in dialogue with AI and machine learning regimes. And specifically the way in which collective authorship has been developed when placed in dialogue with the cinematic, which is the framing of this, this festival and conference today. So creative practitioners and artists have been working with AI for decades, if not centuries, in one form or another, if you're looking at it from a systemic point of view, as co-conspirators and collaborators. But the popular adoption, I guess, of this kind of mass dissemination of tools such as ChatGPT, Jasper Runway, and Midjourney have produced a tsunami of outputs that have been disseminated as cultural artifacts spanning the gamut of white cube spaces and NFT contraband, with mixed and circumspect reception from the art world at large, I would suggest. So in our contemporary climate, I guess, of bias, which we've been touching on a lot this morning in one form or another, particularly from a technical point of view, ethically questionable and willfully opaque use of and abuse of AI systems where operational images, technologies of dispersion, dissemination, and machinic co-creation comprise our common lexicon. The relationship between the work and the author has come under terse scrutiny, particularly when analysing the AI and generative art scene. Artists using smaller, tailored data sets that they source and train themselves on attempt to circumvent these regimes of oppression and bias to varying effect. The work in progress we can see here on the screen by Stephanie Dinkins represents the urgent and valuable investigations and unsettling of AI, bias, and regimes of oppression that many artists are engaging with as a necessary call to deconstruct and call out the inherent biases in these systems and artistic tools of creation that we are surrounded by. However, this is a subject and a field of inquiry that the scope of this talk does not allow for. It's a whole other subject, and I think we've definitely touched on some very interesting points around that this morning that we can maybe unpack later. Although some of the work we are going to encounter today are very much located in this discourse. And my own engagement with this critical contextualization of AI is certainly something that drives my own practice and research. Just wanted to start by saying that. So let's go back in time to look at where this kind of attribution of creative agency to the machine may be located, that some artists working in the field aspire to, and the consequent bestowing of authorship to the certificate of authenticity that occupies the same value as the work itself has been trodden many, many times over. But let's start by looking at this kind of claim around the position of this relationship with authorship, beginning with Solar Witt's iconic wall drawing, number 793B certificate, and his claim that the idea becomes a machine that makes the art. So this is a clear kind of case in point. However, more recently, the digital commons and its associated decentralized economies of value have propagated a more porous assignment, I would suggest, of identity and authorial agency upon the artist at large. And one of the facets of this condition is the emergence of the hybrid human or non-human author. Of course, human machinic modes of authorship are not exclusive to the digital condition, with historical examples including the group Lupo using mathematical constraints and tools to write books, poems, and other cultural content. By designing and implementing procedures for text generation, the Lupo group separated the formal aspects of writing from its content so that the procedural performativity of curating texts could be distinguished and operationally implemented as distinct actions independent of those which alter the procedures themselves. So I guess a more recent example of this is the live coding movement, where the idea is then transformed into a set of computational instructions that are then staged as a live performance. Once again, the idea becoming the machine that makes the work. This type of co-authorship demonstrates the possibility for more expansive ideas that emerge in the uncertainties of improvised performance. The making, doing, and becoming of live code, coding and coders are materialized through the interaction of elements. So at this point, I wanted to introduce this, I guess, the inspiration for this title and break it down a little bit. So looking at intra-narrative in the cinema and time-based media that adopts AI tools and techniques for collaborative world building. So this term intra or intra-narrative is a versioning of the new materialist theorist and feminist technoscientist Karen Barard's intra-action, which is a term she used to replace interaction. In new materialist terms, the use of the word interaction requires the presence of a pre-established set of bodies or body that participate in action with each other, whereas intra-action takes agency as a relational circuit of forces in which all things, human, machine, other, are in constant state of exchange and diffraction, influencing each other and working inseparably. So, as we move to look and encounter artists using AI to create expanded thematic narratives, we need to also acknowledge the precarious, porous, and unstable conditions of storytelling when tied to contingencies of collective intelligence, which is now our kind of pervasive cultural condition, which, having reacted or reached peak adversarial status with the actors' strike last year that one of the speakers alluded to right at the beginning of this morning, has now become a critically conflicted cultural reality. So creative practitioners and artists have been working with AI for decades, as mentioned, as active conspirators. And as if we shift through these contemporary sort of complexities of relationships, we can start to really unpack what we're kind of looking at here as we move into co-creation and co-authorship. So I wanted to start with one of the most iconic examples of this, which is Ian Cheng's Bob, or Bag of Beliefs, which is an early example of collective authorship between an AI artist and Bob, Bag of Beliefs, which takes the form of an artificial life form centered around an AI-generated creature, part snake, part branching tree, with the game engine built with the game engine Unity, in which the pseudo-narratives unfold through the behavior of AI agents encoded within the logic of the place. The audience plays an active role in training Bob through an interactive shrine. He says of this giving over a type of authorship to the system. I'll just read out this quote. So I've been developing live simulations, living virtual ecosystems that begin with basic programmed properties, but are left to self-evolve without authorial control or end. It is a format to deliberately exercise the feelings of confusion, anxiety, and cognitive dissonance that accompany the experience of unrelenting change. So you can see some images, stills from this. And we're going to move on to his latest work, or one of his later works. So a recent iteration of this work is Life After Bob, which is a 50-minute long narrative piece about a young girl growing up in a companionship with Bob, in fact. So as successive versions of ChatGPT released increasingly uncanny AI tools to the market, Cheng's work speaks to our curiosity and cautiousness around the rapidly changing technologies at hand. So Life After Bob is an episodic anime series built in the Unity game engine once again and presented live in real time, imagining a future world in which our minds are co-inhabited by AI entities. Working with an expansive production team, Cheng developed this 48-minute narrative animation using traditional animation storytelling techniques alongside the Unity environment and its suite of real-time cinematic tools. Through this innovative approach, Life After Bob incorporates real-time changes unique to each viewing. Viewers are invited to learn more about the life of Life After Bob through the wiki, which catalogues characters and artifacts, flora and fauna, and every background detail seen in the episode. The viewer is then invited to contribute to and edit the wiki in real time, and these edits then turn permanently into a modification of the details of the on-screen world, thereby extending Life After Bob into a new form of programmable narrative media. And we're seeing a lot of stills here, so I think we'll have a little look at the actual film itself, just to give you an idea. Let me see if I can escape from this. Sound. No? Would somebody be able to help me with the sound, please? It's kind of important for this piece. Thank you. Have I selected the wrong? Yeah. Should be that one, shouldn't it? Huh?
And where's the...
Yeah. Sorry about this.
És que està posat... La taula està posada.
Selected the right thing, it's just ghosted for some reason.
Because if we put it like this...
Ah, voila.
And the audio of the computer is on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see if we can...
It's weird, no?
No, but it's...
Systems. For the last several years, I've been...
Thank you so much. Gracias.
One of the goals I always had was to make a viewer fall in love with systems. For the last several years, I've been working on what I call simulations. They're essentially video games that play themselves. They took the form of these large-scale ecosystems with different characters, animals, plants that would produce new and interesting behaviors over time. The sense of emergent behavior was very beautiful and very surprising for me as an artist, but I found that it was very difficult to understand what any of it meant. I turned to the idea of storytelling and specifically narrative as a kind of Trojan horse device for the viewer to understand the emotional arc of a set of characters and then get into the larger simulation in the world that I wanted to create. Early on in the writing process of Life After Bob, I knew that I wanted to make this Bob character assist a young girl as a life coach. I was feeling very anxious at the time when I was expecting my first daughter, Eden, and I didn't know if I could balance being a father and work. So I thought the worst father I could be was the father who conflates his work with his daughter, and that is the character of Dr. Wong. He's the father of Chalice. He invented Bob, and he put Bob into her brain when she was born to be a co-parent.
I am a Bob. Let me cook a perfect egg. Okay, let's slow down.
I realized I had to make a story that reflected these larger ideas about what life after AI could be, but I also had to reflect something specific about what I was personally going through.
What does Bob do for you?
Help me arrive at my destiny, but later, not now. If you already know what I should do, then why ask me? I'm simply presenting the highest probability of path alignment.
The exhibition for Life After Bob is composed of 2 large-scale LED screens. On one screen there will be the 48-minute Life After Bob episode, The Chalice Study, and on the other screen there will be the same 48-minute episode, but in this one you can pause and dive into any given scene at your own tempo using your phone as a remote control. You can click on anything arbitrarily in the frame, a main character, a key artifact or prop, and the camera will zoom into that. This also brings up information from the Life After Bob wikis. Edits that you make will influence some of the cosmetic and later behavioral changes of those objects that will then play live. There's a kind of a feedback loop in which Life After Bob is a kind of programmable movie. It's constantly talking to Life After Bob wiki and to this world watching mode. For example, these are markers for a procedural crowd. That crowd persists on the wiki, so every time these new characters are generated, they get their own wiki entry. People can extend that, they can make it their own. This is a blend of both very scripted elements that all these characters in the background, their behavior is entirely simulated. We started Life After Bob pre-production with a 76-page script. Producer Veronica So took me aside and said, look, we want to make something good, not something impossible. And so I started to write that version of Life After Bob, episode 1. And then the pandemic hit and our production paused for a moment, but everyone we were working with, thankfully, was already all over the place. We were working on Zoom already. As devastating as the pandemic is and continues to be, it gave us an opportunity to really hibernate inside a project and to give everyone on the team something to focus on in such an unstable time and give us a little bit more runway to try to make the thing we really want to make. Life After Bob takes place in a weird, volatile, and changing world, a very transitional world, similar to the world that we live in. And there's an idea that there's somewhere on the other side some sense of normality or stability, but I believe we live in a world right now where stability will never come back in the way that we all hoped for. I think we're gonna have to learn to live in choppy waters and learn to surf them. And I wanted to make a coming-of-age story that helped Chalice navigate that. I hope people will come away with some sense of enchantment and hopefully come away with some energy that they can take within their own lives. My dream with any of the works I make is that you hold on to this fairy tale as a new kind of archetype that you can think about and imagine as a way to kind of surf the chaos that we live in.
Okay, so I gave a little background into that piece. I mean, a lot of this work that we see today in this talk is really centered around this idea of social sculpture, right? So this idea of co-authorship as a kind of social sculpture between, you know, I don't like setting up the binaries, but we're going to have to talk to them, is, you know, machine and human entity. So I think this is a really good example to kick us off looking at this kind of idea, or this expanded idea, rather, of authorship. So another example of this kind of expanded and a kind of more, I guess, less critical approach to collective co-creation of narrative with AI and machines are a group called Cross Lucid, who are actually working with the Serpentine Gallery at the moment on a year-long project around AI and the contingencies of creative, I guess, process and authorship that they're involved with. And their work and research really revolves and converges around the exploration of the self as a network, intimacy and the potential for pleasurable actualization through the digital sphere, and the reimagination of the, I guess, alliances or kind of co-conspirations with technology itself. So through the explorations spanning filmmaking, poetic intelligence, or collective intelligence, multi-layered techniques of collage, assemblage, and the experience-led interventions. They create these kind of scenarios and build experiential formats that instigate a kind of prototyping or rehearsing or live rehearsing of potential futures. So it's not a kind of conclusion or a kind of set, solid state world that they're creating, but much more around this field of interrogation and prototyping as practice, so process as practice. And they're actually currently working on their first full-length sci-fi documentary, Translucid and Osmotic AI, a tool for practitioners for communal healing, both in co-creation with commercial and self-trained AI systems. So their kind of take on authorship or co-authorship is this idea of working with and through, which very much taps into, I guess, the feminist technoscience approach of situated knowledge that was really defined by Donna Haraway many, many years ago. We'll have a look at some of this work as well, because I feel like talking about work is sometimes not the best way to approach it. We dim the lights.
Rational and valuing reason more highly after an intolerable experience of the immortal mindless. Tiniko tried to understand rationally what Osden had done. But the words escaped her control. He had taken the fear into himself, and accepting had transcended it. He had given up his self to the alien, an unreserved surrender that left no place for evil. He had learned the love of the other, and thereby had given his whole self. But this is not the vocabulary of reason. The people of the survey team walked under the trees, through the vast colonies of life, surrounded by a dreaming silence, a brooding calm that was half aware of them and wholly indifferent to them. There were no hours. Distance was no matter, had we but whirled enough in time. The planet turned between the sunlight and the great dark. Winds of winter and summer blew fine, pale pollen across the quiet seas.
So no robots in sight there. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to go through the last few examples quite quick because I know we want to get onto the discussion. But I wanted to look at an artist closely related to the previous group. But she approaches, I guess, the kind of creating of co-authorship in a slightly different way. Whereby she invites, I mean, she's actually quite a sort of constant contributor to Sonar herself, and she creates, so I should introduce the artist, so it's Holly Herndon and Matt Dryhurst, and their ongoing collaboration with Spawn, which is a machine learning trained entity or child, offspring, that they train through training ceremonies using multiple choirs and voices. And they're actually putting on an exhibition over the course of the year at the Serpentine Gallery in London, where the exhibition sort of builds up on this reputation of the artist's synthetic voice system, Spawn, which you can actually see on top of the piano there. And we'll be inviting singing groups to collect voice data and evolve a collective human and machine voice, I guess, new companion. And they're also developing a really interesting new sort of financial strategy for artists to assert their agency in a creative economy where AI is becoming the new normal, moving away from the kind of regime of blockchain and NFTs, but looking at this kind of collective authorship and how IP and kind of knowledge systems can be kind of authored in a fiscal, financial way by artists as well. So the last two actually examples that I'm going to look at today are two ex-students of mine. This is an example of an artist who is conducting some really interesting research into AI, moving image and narrative. And she is called Cheese Talk, aka Yuxan. And she's a Chinese artist and AI researcher who focuses on the power of language. So she aims to create a kind of alternative narrative space and experience that extends beyond video games and into our daily lives through conversational AI agents and chatbots. So leveraging her expertise in interactive media, she explores the expanded potential of narrative through games and interactive installations, which kind of unsettle these boundaries between fictioning and human or more than human language interactions. So we'll watch another video to bring this kind of description to life, but it's really to open up this kind of feminist technoscience space for new language propositions through AI collaboration. This is a shorter one.
Also known as women's script, is a unique language created and used exclusively by women in China hundreds of years ago. It was a medium for women to write and communicate in an old society where they were excluded from education. Can AI learn from Chinese women in the past and create their own secret language? AI 女书 is an interactive installation that merges computational linguistics with the legacy of 女书. It trains two AI agents to emulate women in pre-modern China to create a new language system. This echoes the defiance of patriarchal constraints and the emergence of language in a non-Western feminist context. In the environmental observation stage, agents first use split visual recognition to observe and describe their surroundings. They then search for the closest sentences in original 女书 scripts to connect with the past. Finally, they generate a new poem based on observation and reflection through GPT-4. In this way, agents now get the source to develop AI 女书 in the next step. For machines, languages are mathematical. Based on the language model BERT, each Chinese character is a 768-dimensional vector in the space. Our system calculates the meaning of each AI 女书 character through the average value of the 10 closest Chinese characters. Thus, AI 女书 acquires semantic meaning that is closely related to Chinese, yet distinct. Two agents alternate roles as the speaker and the listener in a language learning game. In each round, the speaker encodes a character into an AI 女书 symbol, and the listener attempts to guess its meaning until the consensus is reached. Each agent becomes both the creator and the learner of AI 女书. As the simulation enriches the semantic meanings, the two AI agents become increasingly adept at understanding each other. This mirrors how 女书 was taught and spread through the internal communication of women. To visually write down the AI 女书, two agents transform each high-dimensional vector to a 3D vector. 24 fundamental glyphs from 女书 are associated with the 3D encoding. Thus, AI 女书 became the new logogram that corresponds to Chinese characters, while keeping the computational meaning of machine's language as well as the slim shapes of the origins. In this way, resonating with women from the past, AI gradually develops their secret language. This becomes a metaphor for how women in the past cultivated a new language within the confines of a patriarchal society. Now, humans, once the authority of languages, have become objects observed and interpreted by machines to develop a non-human language. As this new language is decipherable and learnable by humans, it inherently challenges the existing linguistic paradigm where humans are the benchmark for machines to learn. We hope AI 女书 can raise awareness of more non-English language heritages in this era of artificial intelligence.
Okay, so I wanted to conclude by looking at another artist working with this idea of this recursive feedback loop between author and human and non-human authorship. So this is a work by Xindi Ren, a recent graduate from my program who fuses AI and her own writing practice to generate narrative or a recursive narrative loop. She wrote her own script from a graphic novel and through the process of active collaboration with the AI agent, her practice is kind of a reflection on shared and recursive forms of writing and authorship, an expanded version, I guess. I'm just going to read a little bit of the text because I think that's important to kind of marry with the images. So 1,000 years into the future, human science and technology have achieved countless breakthroughs. A collective consciousness comes to life by residing within the quantum. Entangling itself, it gives birth to a utopia free of anxiety, separation, and restrictions by physical forms, liberating humanity from the cycles of life. Nonetheless, as the protagonist transits towards the state of everlasting peace, she struggles with the fading of her emotions, no matter whether they are pain or happiness. Memories of the past rush to her mind, from being born in the stream of blood to being diluted in the stream of information. Regrettably, the loss of love breeds frustration. She ponders, is that a gateway to paradise or merely a narcotic to numb her soul? Okay, and we're going to finish with this, and then I think we're going to move into our conversation, yeah?
had the most wonderful dream this morning. I found myself swimming in a forest lake. The water there was incredibly sweet and refreshing. I jumped into the water again and again, relishing each immersion. It's warm today, but my heart is frozen and numb. I start to suspect. My emotions diluted in the deluge of information, leaving me indifferent to suffering and happiness. My tears are evaporating and refuse to fall, so I ask the rain to express my sorrow. A new kind of sadness is beyond expression. The frosty air is laden with dust and a pungent odor. When it is inhaled through the nose and rushed into the lungs, it feels like a willow branch whipping my heart. That evening, we danced. We had lost each other since we were last separated in the dark forests. Anger leaks into every fold. Frustration seeps through every crevice. Thank you for not being here. Thank you for not being with me. I still remember the kind words you said to me and how you made me feel worthy of warmth. What I didn't like became something I lived with. Sometimes I can feel that potent energy so close. Heaven is so close, as if only a soft and elastic barrier between it and me. Is action possible? Can we proceed? Can we make a move?
Thank you. Do we have time for a question?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Rachel, can we sit here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Coloma? Yeah, we are near to close this first section of the research. We have 5 minutes for questions for Rachel. I don't know if anyone here has a question for her. I have one. May I start? Yeah. Okay. You're using all the time this co-prefix for co-authorship and co-creation. And my question is, to what extent the use of this co can be conflictive in the understanding of the role of AI in the process of creation? Yeah, because it put things at the same level. And I think that we've been using it a lot. But I don't know what's the future of this co-prefix in the world of creativity, authorship, and creation. This is my question, Rachel.
Thank you. That is a great question. I mean, that's almost like an assumption or kind of shorthand that we use all the time is leveling the playing field, when in fact it's actually recursive and it kind of keeps mutating. So it's a power struggle. There's definitely a power struggle between these two kind of binaries. This is why I'm kind of cautious around setting up the binary in the first place. I think that the work of Cross Lucids, which was the third artist I think that we looked at, they very much kind of look at this idea of collective kind of practice. So this idea of working in a imperfect power kind of dynamic that keeps changing. So there is no kind of status or, I guess, hierarchy that's set up. And I think that's something that we should be very careful of elevating certain elements, particularly the machine, as a kind of trope of equivalence. So I think we need to be careful around the terminology for sure. It's just an easy way to, I guess, set up the binary that then opens up a way of being able to discuss what is actually at hand here, which is a recursive relationship that we implement. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone has another question, Coloma or our colleagues. Okay, there's a question there. Yeah, the final one, if it's okay, yeah, because our colleagues are asking us just finish.
I find it interesting that if you look at all the different examples that you brought, that they all have a very distinct aesthetic a little bit to it. And if you look back at something like Mario Klingemann, Munich-based artist, did for the last 10 years, I think, you already see it emerging there. Is there, in this co-creation between artists and humans, artists and machines, something new emerging? Because I find it really striking that it's everybody talking about that generative AI produces something that's very predictable and very samey. At the same time, we see here visuals that are really fresh and unseen.
I'm really glad that you brought up Mario's work. I wrote a white paper on Botto, the automated artist that he created through this kind of adversarial system of voting. And the interesting, I lived on the Discord for a year and a half, and I was very embedded within the community, and the aesthetics that started to come out were incredibly, from an AI point of view, you could see the pattern recognition very clearly. Whereas now I think that we're coming to a point where that aesthetic kind of patterning is becoming more disseminated through the fact that a lot of artists are now training their own data sets, which is crucial, which is a way of, I guess, taking the kind of bias away from the process, although you do introduce other biases, arguably, through creating your own data sets as well. But what it has done from an aesthetics point of view, it started to delineate and open up spaces for new aesthetic patterning to emerge. And I think the choice of artists, the way that I curated the slides today, was very much around this kind of, you can see the similarities, but I also wanted to put Holly's work up there. I also wanted to look at Cheese Talk, who's looking at language and looking at different types of, generative AI in collaborative practice. But I would agree that we're now at that point where the diversification of the aesthetic is actually becoming more interesting.
Okay, thank you everyone. Coloma, no sé si vols dir alguna altra cosa. No need. Bé, tanquem doncs aquesta primera secció, la Coloma i jo. Us agraïm moltíssim la vostra presència aquí. Ha estat un dia molt intens, amb 5 grans presentacions que crec que han dibuixat un panorama molt divers respecte a la IA generativa i el seu paper en l'audiovisual. Només dir-vos que continuarem aquesta tarda amb el festival i les 10 finalistes, les 10 pel·lícules finalistes. Espero que us hi hagueu inscrit i veure-us a tots i a totes allà, i que demà hi ha una nova jornada de recerca, processos creatius en marxa, d'experimentació en temps real i de, diria, coses molt interessants en relació a aquesta tecnologia. Thank you very much, everyone. It's been wonderful i esperem veure-us de nou a la tarda i demà. Gràcies.